Hey, we're back here on episode 12, and we're looking at a Kickstarter, and it's a
It's
distiller
something.
that distills things, and it's a little pricey and not necessarily the best product in the world.
I
You
mean,
know,
look for people who have no experience with chemistry or engineering or finger painting, this this is not terrible for you. If you're like familiar with coffee grinders, this is probably okay for you.
I look at so you get down right. You get to the little picture here. It's a Spirit Hunter picture, and it says performance overheating. No, how is that like? That's like a base thing that I expect of something that has a temperature gauge on it. Like intermittency. What the fuck are you gonna get intermittent? Intermittent.
Well, I mean, you're intermittently pretending this thing's working, I suppose.
I guess temperature lecture. What is a temperature lecture?
It's where the thing scolds you for fucking it up.
Outgoing product.
Comes out with
It's
this
a
bomb
stable
voice.
Alexa, mind you.
This is fucking ridiculous.
Like I said,
You know what? It's good to know. It's good to know that if you buy this thing, it is not predicted to have any body damage or system damage.
Great. I mean, those
Or
are very
function,
good
apparently.
selling points. I mean, it was hard tested in the one and only Amazonia.
Oh my god!
Oh my god!
Look at this! Look at this assembly. The setting for all this shit is this guy at a workbench working tirelessly on the electronics that operate this crockpot.
Is that the one where he's got the pot plant next to him, or is that the other one?
There's this warehouse of shit behind this guy.
Somewhere
you know,
in a nameless building in Shenzhen.
It legitimately gets better as you go down the page because he has things that look like they're closer to real distillation equipment, and then he just does it in a pot.
Yeah, and there's the one where he's using the freaking. Why is he using salad tongs to put the shit in?
I don't know.
Those are. I got nothing, honestly. I mean.
Oh my god! This is the funniest shit ever.
No, so this thing, it looks like it's supposed to be a steam distiller for essential oils from plants, and I'm all about that. That's a great idea. Essential oils are fantastic, and so on. And you could use. I'm sure you could use this to do alcohol to some degree. It clearly looks like it's not intended for that. But the thing looks somewhere between a coffee pot, a crock pot, and a juicer. And I'm not sure what the fuck they're going for.
If you want to do essential oils, though, right, it would be infinitely cheaper, faster, and easier to blend whatever friggin' plant you want, boil it-ish in a sealed container, let that cool, strain it, and then basically blend it with alcohol and bleed the stuff off.
Actually, no, the stuff you're just talking about right there is enough. All you have to do is strain it, take the rinse water, and then separate out the oil using an oil divider that you use to make gravy. And so those are the cups. If you ever wonder what I'm talking about, I'm sure everybody who's listening, your mom probably had one of these. It's the cup that looks almost like a beaker that has a stem that comes from the bottom and goes up. That's to allow you to pour off the liquid section and retain the chicken fat or the turkey fat from the stuff you based over the chicken or turkey.
And if you want to go cold, right, you can just blend this stuff, stick it in a thing of alcohol, let it swirl around there without any heat whatsoever. And then you can just basically strain that and then blow off the air, and you're going to get a pure distillate.
Now, if you want to go fancier, for the same fucking money they're asking, $400 for this thing.
Well, that's the early.
That's the early one. Which, by the way, if you want to get 6 of them, it's more than $400 a piece, which is beyond me. Why would you want to buy in bulk if it's going to cost more?
Well, they only have a few hours, and by the time this is up, that early bird discount is.
It's like the Juicero. Do you remember that stupid thing?
What was that? $2,000?
The Juicero. That basically had a mechanical press that pushed on a juice pouch. Which, why wouldn't you just open the fucking thing in the first place?
Yeah. Okay. So some background on that. The Juicero, I think it was $2,000. It was a Kickstarter, right?
Oh, AVE, Arduino versus everything. He did a great video, a teardown of a Juicero.
Well,
he got his hands on one.
3 on it. He actually followed up. And
all
great. I will
funny.
actually endeavor to find that and put it in the show links because it's just so good.
I'm just stunned. I mean,
so I was going to say, for the same amount of money, for $400, I just told you, is you could get the glassware you need.
Yeah.
The actual lab glassware, you can get 4 fucking sets of it. and a man for $400, or you could just get $20 pot. Yes.
I was gonna say.
But also, here's the other thing: if you wanted to, you can get yourself a sock slit extractor, which is infinitely more useful than all of that. Like a really good, fancy one, but also a fucking gigantic one for $400, because a small one is like $60.
Jesus.
Like a decent, like a decent one, a 2440 ground glass, decent sock slit that can run, I don't know, probably about say 30 grams of whatever at a time. That's about $60 odd. And if you want to get yourself a $400 sock slit, you're talking about a big beefy boy that'll probably be able to run a pound of shit at a time.
I'm absolutely stunned. And then I still think my favorite is these terms that they use. The only thing in there that's a legitimate term is a condenser, and it looks like a giant spinning blade of death.
I still like depositor.
Well, what do you expect? It's got to deposit the
my God.
Right into the trash,
non-overheated, stable product.
Oh man.
God, I love people who try to make things that don't know what they're talking about. So it's down in Florida, right? And we went to a rum distillery while we were down there because we had nothing better to do.
Oh, nice.
And this was like last year, and it basically, I felt kind of bad because you go through as a chemical engineer and you realize that these people, they don't have any engineering background whatsoever. They have a general understanding of what their process is, but they don't actually understand the real principles behind why it works. And so then, we get into this thing, and they said, we have this custom-made distillation unit, and it's diamond-shaped. And I'm like, nope.
Oh.
Like, the diamond shape allows it to properly mix in and get all of the smelly things. And you're like, nope. And I'm like, what do you mean? He turns around to me. He goes, nope. What do you mean, nope? I'm like, well, that's not how it works.
Oh, you had to tell the guy.
Literally not how it works.
Why would you do that to the poor guy?
Because there's some, like, once you get enough knowledge, right? There just comes some points where they take you out of your little reverie of being in this happy place where you put off any sort of realistic knowledge, and they just yank you so hard and face plant you in there. And you're just like, nah, I gotta tear this shit down because this cannot be allowed to continue.
Like this is like going to see a sci-fi movie and you're just like, no.
Yep.
None of that shit. I can't suspend my disbelief anymore. You fucked it up.
Yeah, so you got like I think my favorite was one of the prequels for Star Wars, right? They got the giant ship in orbit around the planet,
oh boy,
and it gets shot down. And so they're having a giant lightsaber space duel with a robot inside this thing, and then all of a sudden say, we've lost gravity, and they start tumbling around the interior part of the ship.
I know what you're talking about. God, yeah. We've lost gravity. Nope, it found you.
It's just on every single alternating side of the room.
Yeah, apparently gravity is rotating.
Like I'm okay with grav plating. You want to say, hey, we got this magical substance that sits there and pulls you down. Hey, okay, fine, I buy that. But then all of a sudden you lose power, and then you start bouncing around to the walls because the ship's spinning out of control above the planet, which doesn't even make sense with laser weapons. Instead
of bouncing around, though, you'd just be stuck to a surface.
Well,
centripetal force, man.
Yeah, I mean, we've probably all been on one of those fairground rides that spins you around.
Those are so much fun, though, because you stick your head forward and lose all blood pressure and you're on your brain, and then you have a major headache for the rest of the day.
But at the end of the day, right, unless the only time that would happen is if they're in the dead center of the ship. If they're anywhere else, they're all just going to be rotating freely, and they're just not going to be attached to anything. They'll just be floating around. Like, it should have been an Inception-style battle, maybe.
So, yeah, Inception did get that kind of shit better. The only problem was they weren't in a fucking spaceship.
No, they weren't. That's what makes it
sad. It was just everything exploding around them because, fuck you, that's why.
So...
Blah!
So on the topic of distillation, check out this link.
All right.
I don't know.
Sodium nitrate is successfully made using lye and nitric acid. Okay, that's fine. Synthesized literally out of thin air. No, that's not fine.
Reaction.
No.
Okay. Look, so there is a way to synthesize nitrate or nitric acid out of thin air. It basically you just have to shock the shit out of it. And I'm hoping that's what they actually did here, because otherwise it's going to sound really
It's
stupid.
a matter of building an incredibly cheap Birkeland.
I mean, basically,
reactor.
make an arc lamp, and they'll do it.
Yeah, it uses a couple of 3D printed components and a bunch of other off the shelf things. It's basically a big FU to gun control around the world.
Oh well, so here's the thing: you don't even need to do that if you want to get nitrate. All you have to do is go strain some dirt. Do people not know this shit? That's how you have saltpeter in the first place. You went out and you strained, and this is going to sound crude. You strained some shitty dirt, because that's what plant animals do. They will consume plants, and then they will deposit out the rear end of them, because there we have actual depositor. They will deposit out the rear end of them a much more concentrated form of nitrate salts. And all you have to do is go get some good field soil, like that's used to grow plants, and strain out water from that, and you get yourself some potassium nitrate.
Well,
you get a bunch of other salts that are come out of that, but you can do fractional crystallization and get yourself nitrates.
I think so. I think he did set up basically an arc lamp. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's inside the upside down bottle.
Yeah, the point of this though is for the person that wouldn't have access. It's like the 3D printing lower, as opposed to buying an 80% lower.
So
sometimes
the cool
you
thing
can't do that. Where this would be like you're a person.
A better question is why.
Well, so there's a guy.
Fifth floor apartment.
There's a guy I follow on YouTube, a chemistry guy. I don't think he's been active for a while, but he's good. He has some good chemistry videos. Doug's Lab, and I believe one of his it's either him or another guy I followed, but I think it's Doug's Lab. He did one on forming nitrate or nitric acid out of air. Basically, you just have a significant discharge over your airstream, and then you pass that through water. If you have hydroxides like drain cleaner, that'll soak up any acid that you produce. The thing you have to be careful about is, of course, you can also produce nitrites or nitrous acid. So you're going to be producing a variety of different nitric acids or nitrous acids. Nitric or nitrous oxides that come out of the discharge. So you're not necessarily going to be getting a pure substance. But if it's also going to be very dilute. You can always concentrate it.
Alternatively, you could just sit there and boil off fish tank water. Just throw that out there. That's
the same principle as the cow manure kind of stuff.
I know. So I see this, and every once in a while you see these people and they post something like, "Oh, look at this really cool science thing that I did." And my first question is why, right? It's okay.
The answer is because it's cool.
I could accept that, but I don't understand why. Like you could buy this stuff; it's not particularly expensive.
Well, there's always a chance. So not everybody knows like where you can go out and buy yourself some potassium nitrate. Which, by the way, if you need it really bad, get yourself some stump killer, because that's usually 98% potassium nitrate or sodium nitrate. So, by the way, there's a pretty damn pure source of that out there. Just get some stump remover.
I'm just gonna go with Google, right? I googled potassium nitrate and I got 99.8% purity, and it's a 10-pound bag of it for $20. For $20, I can get 10 times more than his $50 reactor. Like, why would I do this?
So again, this is very interesting design, and this is actually something that is used in some rare circumstances. Actually, one of the more interesting uses of, say, a reactor like this is the ketene process for producing hydrazines. So that involves a UV lamp and a gas production, and there's a discharge involved. So very cool stuff that you can do with that. It's very cool. Oh, Cody's Lab was another one who did gas discharge to get nitric acid out of air. So people might know Cody's Lab more than Doug's Lab.
It's like $17 online though for a 10-pound bag. Why would I do this? So
the cool factor is really the only reason I can see to do this.
I guess
unless like you're on a list or something.
Right, exactly. It's to make sure that you don't.
And if you're on a list or something where you can't buy shit online, then maybe there's a reason for that at this point. And believe me, I'm all there with you should be able to do this shit on your own.
Yeah.
And with or without a list. But at the same time, like if you're on a list, have a friend who's going to be able to tell you whether or not you're going too far. You know.
I have a buddy of mine who's on a list, and he got on the list because his kid was like, I don't know, 10-ish, somewhere around there, and he was hardcore autism, And so all he did was he got obsessed with the Twin Towers, and all he would do, right? All he would do is I don't know why he would go and develop the Twin Towers at scale in Minecraft, and then he would do it over and over and over again. So he kept on looking at and Googling Twin Towers plane crash, and it was just nonstop. And then it'd be Twin Towers plane crash and how many people dead. And so my buddy was going out to try to get his mortgage, and they turned around. They said, "You're on a terrorist watch list." I'm like, "Why?" And they're like, "Oh,
for Googling
IP address."
For Googling, Jesus fucking Christ! Like,
so
get the
folks, use
fuck out of here.
.com for any searches that are even remotely questionable.
Or if you really have that kind of weird ass search, get onto a fucking just go on like I2P or something like that, and have fun searching your dark webs for shit. Just because, holy crap, man.
Well, I mean, it was perfectly innocent, but it was really funny.
But the thing is, like, once you get on those lists, even suing to get off those lists, they use as carte blanche prima facie to put you on another list.
Oh yeah.
I shit you not. Like, you try even
that whole system.
Even even submitting a fucking FOIA to find out which lists you're on is list worthy.
Oh yeah, that'll just put you on a different new list.
Well, that if you're sitting there FOIAing yourself, then you obviously you have concerns about yourself, and that is a list of citizens in its own right. Which, journalists get put on a list when they submit FOIAs, but they're kind of
This goes back to the you look at the whole Trump thing. Trump was charged with obstruction of or they accused him of obstruction of justice because he was obstructing an unjust act because it was looking into him for nothing.
Isn't it
same kind of thing?
Fucking ridiculous.
It is. It's pretty great. I love it. It made me so happy.
Okay, so hopping.
I hope they impeach him again. That's gonna be funny.
I do too. I really do.
While he's getting shit done, they're going to be barking around Congress. Who gives a fuck?
You guys are going to like this one.
Efficient synthesis of, oh boy.
Complicated.
I have to go read this one.
Org. All right.
Well, basically,
information dense molecules.
Super non-dense, non-science man breakdown. Basically, complex organic chemicals.
Yeah. Okay. Blah blah blah. So the idea is that they could get to efficient synthesis of. So here's I can immediately see if this does pan out the way I'm guessing it does an application here. A lot of biomolecules that are important, especially for pharmaceuticals, are notoriously difficult to produce in situ in lab and so in vitro.
Or like this one we're hearing about that we need so much of that comes only from sharks or something that we're going to need from the upcoming.
Well, here's another example: is if we want to get like opiates, if we want to use morphine, we have to get that from the opium plant. We don't have a total synthesis for morphine that is as cost effective as just growing a plant.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever see, for instance, the dumb shit we do over in the Middle East where we have soldiers protecting the crops that other countries are selling back to us.
Excuse me, freedom.
No, actually, here's the thing: is I actually agree with that because otherwise we don't have those for the planet, not just for us.
Well, and that's when you start talking about this. This goes into a deeper discussion on pharmaceuticals. When a lot of people sit there and you get like Barry, what's his name, Sanders?
Yeah,
is it Barry Sanders? Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders. I can always. Those,
oh my God!
Like Bernie, no.
So whenever he gets up there and he says, "Hey, it costs $1.50 for a drug," that's only like one class of compounds that we produce,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
Like that's basically your salt compounds, and that treats a multitude of diseases. And maybe we can make the argument that they're overproduced, but there's QA stuff and all these other things that bloat the cost of that $1.50 pill. As soon as you start talking about these more complex molecules that we use for drugs, any of the things that we have to grow in an animal cell, any of the things that we have to grow in plant cells, that stuff is A, very difficult to get going on a single batch, and B, it costs millions of dollars to process it into a refined product because of all the other crap that we don't need going into the drug.
So you have to understand with these things, like even if you have fantastic yields on each step of a process, a total synthesis, your end yield is always going to be shit.
Yep.
And if a plant does it, so here's the thing: if a plant's going to do it, and the rest of the plant can be used in some way that's going to drive the cost down, then that's way more cost effective than having like a 50-step synthesis that ends up with a grand total of maybe a 3% yield. If you get a 30% yield in pharmaceutical total syntheses, that is an amazing yield.
It is.
Like, and we're talking about end product in the damn pill, not like, I got a batch of the actual pure chemical too.
When you start looking at stuff like this, if they come up with a way to synthesize organic molecules without using intermediaries such as modified, what's the bacteria they use? It's plasmids and all the other stuff.
They'll do plasmid modification, and oftentimes they'll use like E. coli and others.
That's typically we use that for like insulin production, and we actually understand that, and you don't have to go. But when you start looking at like eukaryotic cells, in order to get the eukaryotic cell to produce the protein that you're actually interested in, and by the way, you have to keep that protein stable and not breaking down and all this other stuff.
Make sure the cell's happy, which is really hard.
You have to force it down a series of metabolic pathways before that gene becomes active. And so by the time you start talking about doing all that stuff, it is a multi-week. So first you got to culture the thing just like a batch of beer, right? You got to culture the thing until you actually have enough of it. And then you got to force it to go down different metabolic pathways by introducing other things in its environment. And then after it's been producing enough of that protein where you can harvest that like mix of goop, you then have to basically lyse all of the cells because they don't emit the proteins into the surrounding solution. So you have to lyse the cells. Then you have to take all of that gunk out and just hope you can purify the protein from the water plus all of the residual crap.
Here's the other thing. You get the hope. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm good.
I was going to say, the other thing is you have to hope that lysing your cells, etc., isn't going to fuck up the material you're trying to get
protein.
out.
Yeah, that's the other.
It's not just the cell like rupturing, but if you're also going to be releasing all those lysosomes, think of the lysosome in a cell as being the stomach in a human. It's a great thing that our stomachs aren't able to dump the contents into the rest of our body cavity.
Yes.
That would be horrible. So imagine lysing a cell when you break these lysosomes that are hanging out inside the cell. Those little digestive stacks, they open up, and all the wonderful proteins that digest everything from inside get to spread around the cytosol and the rest of your solution. So unless you have a way of neutralizing those and not neutralizing the protein you care about at the same time, you don't want to denature the thing you're after. For instance, with insulin, you don't want to denature the insulin. You just want to get it out of the cell.
So at the end of the day, like when you start talking about if we have a true way to get actual synthesis, that's going to save a ton of money in the long run, and it'll actually impact drug prices. But whenever you see these people who are complaining about the cost of drugs are actually a lot more expensive to produce than you think. And, they'll sit there. There's a whole lot of drugs that are not profitable to make, but they'll get viable because the pharmaceutical company will offload those production costs on other drugs which are cheaper. And that way they can provide meds to people that actually need it.
Yeah, and that all that said, there is something to be said about a lot of other drugs being way cheaper to make.
Yes.
And the great example of those that happen is, so if anything you buy, say, from India, that's going to be dirt cheap. It's going to be because it was dirt cheap to produce there, not because it was not because the price was somehow offloaded to another drug. Those are the kind of for instance, let's just use it as an example everyone's going to understand, but not actually going to be used to treat something. Caffeine pills. Caffeine is really cheap to make.
Yep. Really cheap to make.
And so if you get them in the United States, you're going to have some cost. You can have outside the United States, pretend there's some cost barrier that'd be a little much cheaper. It wouldn't be more expensive in the U.S. because they're offloading things necessarily in a direct fashion. Part of that's the R&D forward investments that they do as well.
Yep.
So you have to consider that they have basically a 5-year term before the patents wear out. So drug patents are very short-lived, and in that time they have to recoup costs on the drug that they've expended the research on, but they also have to get enough cost to cover the library of candidates for the next round of whatever they're making that are going to be complete failures. Like all the way out into phase 2 kind of failures. Those are really expensive failures.
By the time you're done with all of it, the actual profit that pharmaceutical companies make is not particularly large year to year. The majority of them. every once in a while you'll have a banger year, and that's what everybody likes to sit there and go. They say, hey, you made 30%. Yeah, well, they'll make 30% this year because they just released a brand new drug, and it's for a unique therapy and all this other stuff. But then all of a sudden, the next year they're back down in the 5% margin region, and they're trying to recoup costs from all their crap.
Or 10 years later, they made a really major fuck up at the beginning of the whole thing. For instance, like exactly. I don't know, Biox, where they find out that it's exploding hearts. That wasn't a really good idea.
Yeah.
So apparently it works great for pain reduction, until you die, until it's permanent.
And that's kind of the thing is every single time we start talking about drugs and drug manufacturing, it's actually really expensive to do. The whole life cycle process is very expensive to do. And yes, there's a crazy markup on each drug that works, but a lot of that goes to pay for the drugs that don't. And we kind of miss that point.
Now, also another thing to consider with big pharmaceuticals is a lot of the money there isn't in the individual treatments; it's more in the scale. It's because you're serving the world with these necessary things.
Yep.
Now, all this said, you have that prick who's I think been hanging out in prison for a little while. So if you have someone who comes in with property management and decides to buy a drug property and then sell it for hire. So taking something that was, I don't know, like say $10 a pill and making it $1,500 a pill. If you have a prick who comes in like that, just because insurance companies will pay it. So that's actually one of the major things there is people think, there's like say a cancer treatment that has a huge expense to it, except that the insurance companies are paying it. Well, that's the incentive to raise the cost on these things. And the unfortunate thing is if an insurance company doesn't pay it, then their cancer patient dies. That's also terrible. So there really isn't, and there's really no way to help the people who are caught in the middle without insurance, without finding a way to just get them on some kind of insurance. You can't just talk. You can just talk to the company, but they're just not going to listen to you because you're not say representative of 10,000 customers. You're representative of one.
The problem when you have people come in, and I know who you're talking about, but
yeah, I can't really.
That is
Shkreli.
Yes, that guy.
Yeah.
Shkreli.
The problem with that is actually that's not just a drug thing. We see it as a drug thing because people get all antsy when we start talking about that. But that is a universal problem that we have with IP and patent kind of around the world. And we call those, for those who are not in the engineering community, we call them patent trolls. And what they do is they walk in and they buy up a whole bunch of patents, and then they will either sue people for not using them or jack the price up on whatever the technology is.
Or they'll just sit on them like a prick and wait for everybody to scream at them, and then they'll sell it for a high price.
This could be really well realized is to think about the people that park on domain names.
Yeah.
Very similar in that kind of way.
Except for me, because when I park on a domain name, it's because I want to make something funny later.
Fair.
But when I say that, I have like 10 or 15 domains I just kind of hung out on. For instance, what was it? I think I had AOC.healthcare for a while.
A lot of opportunities there.
Oh, yeah, I'm not even looking to like make money on it. I just thought it was fucking hysterical. And if she was going to run on something, I was just going to put a couple memes up or something. I think I did the
something about farty cows always goes a long way.
Well, here's what I did. I actually, you might remember the reason why this was funny enough later on, but I got Sarkeesian.Okinawa. Because she was talking about bombing them back to what was it, traditional values? So I went and put some memes of her with shitty quotes up.
Sarkeesian? When was she talking about bombing Okinawa?
No, she said, something or another, we bombed Japan back to traditional values. That's just I think you really said that. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
There's another Gamergate throwback to people that are somehow relevant, but completely irrelevant in the actual grand scheme of things.
The only relevance we had was that the domain name was parked.
I think the biggest thing with Sarkeesian and Gamergate that was a huge fuck up with the whole community is they gave her attention. They should have just ignored her and let her be a troll with her own little domain rather than trying to pull her into the discussion.
It's funny because I'm actually watching The Boys, that series on Amazon.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you that in the second season, that the bitchy one that comes in, she just reminds me of her.
Well, I mean,
she kind of looks like her, but even though she's supposedly she's from Portland or whatever, I'm just like, oh, she just looks like Sarkeesian, but with an entire face makeover.
Sarkeesian was a special
Sarkeesian with a face.
So I've always been amused by this because this seems to be the case with like social justice types. They all tend to be like absolutely hideous, like rejects from the genetic pool, and so they find one that's passable as a human being, and maybe under the right circumstances with sufficient alcohol would be fuckable, and then they put them out in front and say, "Oh my God, look, this person is the icon of what we're talking about." Meanwhile, you go to the Antifa Thug page, and it's just a list of God's rejects.
What it is it's just a list of recessive disorders. You can just sit there and go, all right, fetal alcohol syndrome. I don't know what the fuck the parents were thinking. Just keep going. There are people there who clearly did not have all 23 chromosome pairs. And then there are some people there who happen to find the missing ones and collect them all.
Oh yeah, quite a few even extras.
Yeah, there's like that one guy who looks like his head's trying to mitose.
There's like half of them that look that way. Come on, let's be honest.
They
all have like the same appearance. It's just fascinating for a group that wants to champion diversity. They are the least diverse looking group of motherfuckers.
Well, they certainly give humans diversity. It's just that they're the tail end of the curve.
Poor people.
And so with that,
that's all right. That's all right. We have a place for them. It's called Portland, and they should just
they can also
go to San Francisco. The problem is they spread.
Yeah.
They spread and scream.
I support a Snake Plissken option. I watched a really excellent series of documentaries about New York and L.A. Starring Snake Plissken. I believe he's with Mutual of Omaha, maybe. And they really bring home the point of how to deal with these problems. They really do.
Well, what you do is you don't listen to the child that's screaming. Instead, you wait for them to stop screaming, take them over to Dairy Queen, ask what the fuck they want, take them home, and then ground their ass.
Fair. I like the wall, too, And
I also like the idea of just like telling them, all right, if you don't want to be citizens of the United States, then your passport's now voided. Welcome. Just go ahead and try to come back in. Fuck you.
It's just an absolutely fascinating group of individuals. That's the reality of it.
The next article.
They are special.
Surprising. Boo. Absolutely no one. Narcissists are drawn to leadership theory.
Oh well, everyone knows that.
So I'm going to throw out that any single time you see science on narcissism, you should take it with a whole shaker and the 10-pound bag of salt that you keep for, doing stuff on the rocks. The reality is that psychologists throw around narcissism all the time, and they tend to try to apply it to people that they don't like, and that tends to be because it is a socially distinct field. It is basically 96% left wing. They tend to throw that on CEOs, political leaders, and anybody that disagrees. Right? So, and a perfect example of this is there's actually a study that was published, I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, where they came out and they said that folks on the right are more likely to be narcissistic. Right? And this is again one of those things that you see whenever you see that. And they turned around and somebody sat there and went through their data and found out that their data was wrong, right? The data was actually said the opposite.
That sounds very narcissistic to me.
Yeah, well, it does. But they found out that the data was wrong, and that in reality it's the left wing that tends to be more narcissistic. Now, I'm not saying that the left wing is more narcissistic, but what I am saying is that ultimately a lot of times this gets tossed around as a thing, and it very rarely holds up in peer review.
So here's something funny.
Very rarely holds up for replication, not peer review.
Here's a funny thought about it, though. I think it was a 2014 study that said that intelligent people are no longer on the left or on the right. And then, of course, there's also the fact that by study, I can't remember which study it was now, that the people on the right tend to have more and better sex. Quite frankly, if it's the right-wing people that are narcissists, they also seem to be the people who are getting laid more often and are also smarter. So maybe there's something to be said about narcissists then. Correlation is not causation, but
that does seem to be what it is. And then they'll do some funky things when they're doing like left-right dynamics. I think one of them was they tried to have people solve a math problem while drunk. Right. And then if they go and they solve the math problem while drunk, they tend to think more conservatively. And you're like, oh my God, just shut up.
Yeah, okay. And what about drug tolerance? Is that going to factor in at all?
I have no idea, but you know, the thing to me is I turn around and I see this and I say, so you start having to use your side of your brain that is devoted to logic and reasoning, and all of a sudden you get conservatism. Not a fucking surprise, right? Like this is.
Wait, hold on a second. You're going to tell me that engineers tend to be a little bit more conservative too?
They certainly do compared to the rest of the academic population.
I mean, wait a second. In core STEM, like chemistry and biology to mostly to the same degree, physics, that kind of shit. The hardcore mathematicians, they're going to be a little bit more conservative too. Is that kind of what you're going with there? Because
certainly more so than the 96% left-wing psychology.
This is sounding a little bit racist, or I'm not sure exactly how you're coming off of this, but it's also a bit sexist too.
Well, it's good to know that the Democrats is a race.
Oh, absolutely, it is.
I mean, you know what? I know that they're opening up the gender question. I think that's a great thing. You should just, all of these people who want to, they want to operate outside the gender binary, they should just put down under gender Democrat, and you're okay.
Look, I found out, earlier this year that whole countries are also races. So, and this actually several years ago now too, with the quote Muslim ban, when they decided they're banning Muslims, that was going to be a major problem. Except that it didn't ban 93%, 94% of Muslims on Earth. It was just and you had to go down to number 7 on the list before you got to any of the countries that are in the top 10 most populated by Muslims.
Yeah.
Well,
you know what?
All right.
The math isn't really important. It's the sentiment that counts.
I mean, I know that there's some thoughts there about exactly how are you going to be able to make this offensive to you personally. But it's if you only have 3 options, what the hell are you doing with your life? You got to come up with more things you're offended by. You got to be creative with this kind of shit, otherwise it's just going to get boring.
Well, I thought that. That's right. So circa 2014, when I came into the Culture Wars, I thought they would get bored. I thought they would get bored and go home and shut up and go away. And they didn't. They just got worse.
No. Not they won't get bored because they're stupid. I'm talking about people getting boring to me. I'm not bored by this shit. Be offended by more interesting things. Be offended by people who have their middle finger longer than their forefinger.
I thoroughly support everybody's right to be self-righteous, but don't come complaining to me when nobody wants to give you a dime for it. That's all I'm saying.
See, I'm offended by that personally. I don't know.
Well, that's too fucking bad for you. Oh, man. But going back to the original topic, narcissists drawn to leadership theories. I'm just saying that anytime I see narcissism show up in a psychological paper, I'm going to wait for the replication because it pretty much is guaranteed to fail. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm not, because this kind of falls under the heading of no shit Sherlock. So usually the no shit Sherlock papers are accurate. I'm just saying until it passes replication, it's probably bullshit.
Fair enough. It was in American Psychologist, so give that whatever weight you want, which is potentially. Well,
I think their overall their batting average is 80% failure. So
of course
you're more likely to whatever the APA says. If you argue against it, you're more likely to be right. At this point, just statistically speaking,
it used to be reputable,
Yeah, sure it was.
ESM used to not be a fucking clown book.
Oh, man. Siam. Look at Siam and their specialty thing.
I'm so upset with Siam right now.
Oh, my God.
So they threw out what was it, like 100 years of credibility?
Yep.
With one fucking editorial.
One editorial. Yep.
That's the thing. It was the editor's note. It's basically a glorified blog article at the front of the magazine. So they had, every month you have it come out, and then you have the editor's note up front, and then they decided to endorse fucking Biden. It's like, what the fuck's wrong with you people? It's like the whole point of these. If you're gonna have politics involved, it's to be subtle about it. Like put it in like the intro to your fucking articles. We all know global warming's a problem, and then keep going. I'm looking at you. Okay, we're not going to say the word. We're just going to stare at you and think it really hard.
Well, I don't understand why they did that. That was.
Oh, here's the funny thing. If I order sea salt right now, it'll be delivered November 3rd, along with all the other salt from around the country.
There's bound to be a fair extra supply.
Well, this will be Mediterranean sea salt, and it's extra coarse grain.
I am looking forward to. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't know. I am still not sure how this is going to go.
Well, here's the thing. If you have enough ammo at home, then you should be happy about having that night go down whichever way it does.
Yeah, fair.
Because either you're going to have a bunch of neighbors who stand with you, or you're going to have some neighbors who are slightly miffed, especially if they try to come over for a cup of sugar and find out they can't get any.
Oh my god. Well, it'll be interesting. My largest concern, right, is if Trump wins and they throw a revolt, because that's kind of what they've been doing for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Like, what do? We've had what, 3 coup attempts at this point, and hasn't worked out so well.
They've been woefully ill-equipped to deal such a blow to our noble republic.
All they've done is firebomb their own houses. Like,
well, no. Here's the thing: is I feel really bad for the people who are in the community who are just trying to fucking living, and all they get for being there, trying to have even a modicum of reasonable expectations for society, is they get shat on by all these young dumb fucks who come by with torches. They aren't even from around their neighborhood either. They just come in and torch shit and go away. Like, welcome home, you fucking assholes.
Well, actually, that just happened with some Portlanders that went to Vancouver,
Philly?
Washington, I want to say. Like,
okay.
It's like an hour away because, what was the story I heard? Some guy shot at police, got in a shootout, and ended up getting shot to death when he was shooting a gun at other police.
Yep.
And so because he got in a shootout with police and died in said shootout, they need to riot and loot. Excuse me. They need to drive an hour away to another city to riot and loot in the name of the people that are offended there.
Yeah. I mean, we also saw a nation of riots over a guy who OD'd on fentanyl and pot. So,
oh my god! You know what really pissed me off?
I don't want to throw that politics out there, but there you go.
You know what really pissed me off about that is that if you actually go, the people were going, "Oh my god, they didn't find any evidence of the specialty hired whatevers," right? If you actually dig into it, the other people that the family hired to go look at it, they didn't even bother with the talk screen. They didn't even bother with. They just said that because of the nature of the cuts and bruises on the guy's face, that indicates that too much pressure was used, and all of the actual damage that we would normally expect to see wasn't there because it's soft tissue. Here's
the thing: I agree that there were ways that all could have been handled better.
Sure.
Chauvin's a piece of shit. I think everybody can agree with that. The guys sitting there all joking about it. Hey, you're gonna check his neck, etc. No. We get it. The guy's a complete fuckhead, and he should have been. If he was going to die that day, he should have died sitting up in the back of the cruiser with someone pounding on his chest to get him to breathe.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah,
so everybody can agree on that. But the fact that
tell that the guy was not with it at
oh man, I watched the full fucking thing from when they go up to the car and all the way back to where he died, and I gotta say there are so many ways it could have been handled better, but at the same time, holy shit, they should have had an ambulance show up at his vehicle, not at the police vehicle.
Yep.
It should have been. That was so clear right there and then.
Well, I mean, so the difficulty you have, right? And this is from my time as an EMT. You are not going to get a medical crew there until he is fully subdued. And that's not like the ambulance won't show up on site because your EMTs aren't armed, right? Like,
the cops.
If you have somebody who's going crazy, they aren't showing up until the cops get them subdued. So you can turn around and say that this would have been the ideal scenario, but EMTs won't show.
Well, so the thing is, like, you could have had him around the corner or some shit. There could be protocol for that. Blah blah. You know, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Sure.
Well, that said, even the EMTs that showed up were actually in TAC vests.
Well, that also said, like, the first round of EMTs that tried to come out ended up at the wrong fucking place, like 5 minutes in, and it took them another 5 minutes to get there.
Yeah,
there was incompetence at so many levels in that scenario. It was mind-boggling.
Oh, absolutely. That was a shit show and a half. But it is. I'm not sure I would be. The thing that always bothers me with these protests is they always choose to go. They never highlight somebody who you're like, yeah, that guy was a pretty sweet dude, and he. They take the pieces of garbage.
Why the hell not? This is the perfect opportunity for everybody to come together. The guy's a concealed carry holder, like in good standing, doesn't have a record.
Yep.
Bad shoot. The whole shebang. Nobody says a goddamn word.
Well, here's another thing. Like, let's go beyond the pieces of shit that are chosen to be martyrs. Let's just look at how things were handled post facto. There was maybe 5 people in the country that didn't agree that Chauvin's a piece of shit. We need to take care of this thing. How do we make things better? They took all the goodwill that existed in the country, and after a week, they destroyed every last shred of it. It was all gone. Nobody was happy with them anymore. They had a handful of people that were left going, "Yeah, BLM." Everyone else.
I think if they've actually, at this point, there is less support for BLM than there was prior to the whole
hard numbers,
thing.
It's declined tremendously. It was something like 40% among Republicans before at the time of.
Here's the other thing. You found out that BLM not only is staffed, not only was it founded and currently operated by a bunch of avowed and trained Marxists. It's funny because all the Jews, and I can say this one because I can, come from a community here. All the Jews that had figured out that BLM is basically staffed by anti-Semites at the top, just kind of forgot that overnight with this whole thing, and then they got to find out all over again in a very happy manner.
Well,
it's just the level of hate at the top destroys all the goodwill that comes in from the bottom, and it's sad.
Well, I mean, I think that for me, right? Like for me, and this is my thing, and it happens every single time you see these left-wing cases. Yeah. I agree with the premise of whatever the left is arguing. Right, I agree that in the abstract we should do the absolute best we can to protect every member of our community. Sure. We should not target anybody. I do think that there's a lot of things that can be done with policing that's unfair, but at the same time, right? Some people fucking deserve it. And we have to get over that fact that sometimes there are shitbags, and the shitbags are going to be the shitbags being shitbags are going to do shitbaggy things, and they're going to put themselves in a position that is not good for their long-term survival, right? and that is the reality that we live in. It is a shame. It is terrible. I wish there weren't shitbags, but that's the reality of it. And I can't get over and sympathize with individuals who are actively fucking up their own life. I just can't get there. Now, if you turn around and you find somebody who is the cops are targeting unfairly, and you highlight those cases, I'm perfect. I'm right there because I've had my fair share of bad run-ins with cops. Like,
you get somebody that's underserved that should be getting, proper treatment or proper protection, because that's a very real thing. That happened in my life, as a matter of fact, to my grandmother.
Absolutely. Like, I don't think that there's a person among us who says that the cops act, the best that they could in every single scenario. Most of us either know somebody who has been screwed over by the police or has been screwed over by the police themselves. But don't come into me and grab somebody and say, hey, yeah, I know he was on an overdose level of fentanyl, but no, hold on. Let's back it up to this.
I know he was on a 5-month bender, but
right. I know that he's been arrested 15 times for cocaine abuse, and he put that against a pregnant woman.
I love that shit. They're sitting there trying to make him seem like he's the everyman's black man. I'm sorry, but no, that is not the typical experience.
No,
in the community,
and it's not. It's not, and we need to deal with that. We have to be able to have conversations about the bad things that do happen to good people.
Now, he might have been trying
to make bad people into good people so we can talk about the bad things that happen to bad people.
He might have been trying to get straight with the law and so on. It might have been that he turned his whole life around, etc. But nobody knows that because the guy was doing fucking pot and fentanyl.
Yep.
And he OD'd before anybody had a chance to get to know him any better.
And if we're entirely honest here, I mean, first point, the pot kind of doesn't matter. But second point, which really matters a lot, is he had just flipped like a bad check on somebody. So of course the cops are going to come.
Well, so I think, this is one of those. I don't think it was a bad check. It was like a counterfeit. Yeah, it was like a counterfeit $20 bill.
Oh, sorry,
and I mean, like the whole police call on that's something that happens. Right, so if you've ever worked in counter service, people have counterfeit bills. A lot of them don't even know it because it doesn't get caught. Right, like it's very, very possible that he was entirely doing the right thing and he had a counterfeit bill by mistake.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
right. That's entirely possible.
The fact is, he decided to run instead of stay there when the guy called him on his bad bill.
Right, exactly. I think he stayed there. Didn't he stay there?
Oh, he went and he got in his truck. That's why I went and found him. He was like around the block over in his truck. And the guy.
I thought that he was still like at the gas station or whatever.
The clerk came out, and when the cops showed up, the clerk came out, pointed to the vehicle, which was around the corner across the street. And then the cops went over to get him, and because he was in the car with his sister or whatever.
His sister and
other people.
Yeah.
And he was in the car already, and they were just kind of hanging out, getting ready to leave.
I mean, again, I don't think the cop should have been involved in a $20 counterfeit bill, right? Like if it was the 10th time that week that he'd come in and dropped off a counterfeit $20 bill, then you inform the cops of what's going on, and they can look to maybe set up a sting operation.
My guess is that him bugging out is probably what tipped the clerk off that he knew.
Well, that's I think if you go back to the phone call that clerk was saying was he's acting all weird and blah blah blah,
right?
And that the cops responded to that, and they also said, "Hey,
it could have been a well check." It also could have been a well check involved from that, and that's even if that's the case, it was handled even worse.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If you're looking at that as a duty of care kind of thing, then it's an absolute failure. It's like
what I don't understand is how is it that he got out of the cop car once they got him into it, right?
He complained tremendously about not being comfortable being inside of a vehicle, and
he was already shouting he can't breathe before he got to the damn car.
Yeah, no, I know, but I mean, like if you look at it, right, they load him in one side of the cop car, right? Yeah. They get him in there. They get the door closed. Everything's all set to go. He could be there, or they can meet an ambulance. They can get to the hospital. Yeah. They're in a good spot. And then all of a sudden, he bursts out the other side of the cop car. What the fuck happened?
Well, he was talking a whole lot about him being uncomfortable being in cars. And, I guess something happened to someone he knew about things, and he had a whole complex about it. The other two people who were in the car with him initially were telling the cops, oh, yeah, he has this thing. He's really scared right now. And all this, sure, treat him with kid gloves and keep him subdued and whatnot. But there's that duty of care thing again. That just monumental failure there.
I agree. Like there was failure all around. I think that I think that there's consequences.
He also should have just fucking listened. Is kind of what is a big thing.
See, I disagree with that.
Let me just
unless it's an unlawful thing. If you listen to a cop, it just goes better.
Let me just stop you both for a quick second on that and talk about the talk. A lot.
Do you think that people like me don't get the talk?
Yeah, no, I got to talk.
Exactly, like any good parent gives their kid the talk.
I'm sorry, I got the talk. Look, if you ever get pulled over, it's yes sir, no sir. Keep your hands on the wheel and look forward.
I got the talk.
Exactly what they say.
I also didn't do the listen, and I faced the consequences of that.
Right, exactly.
There you go.
It was, but
I got told you're at a disadvantage here. You're going to, you're a guy. If you're ever involved with a woman, then you're going to get screwed by that. You're a guy of a particular community here. If you ever get pulled over and you don't follow orders, you're going to get screwed by that.
Yep. Yeah. No.
Nobody will have sympathy ever.
I remember getting the talk, and I absolutely remember not listening, and I also remember that the first time I got a ticket, because I didn't, they were about to escalate it to something else, right? And there's been a few times where I was so indignant at the fact that, like, I've had officers that would follow me with their lights off for like 2 miles, and then they just finally, they thought they were going to get something.
I had that one.
Yeah. Like they think they're going to get you on something because it's end of the month or whatever, and their quota's up.
Yep.
Yeah, cops are fucking pricks. And then they turned around, like he almost tried to pull me out of the fucking car. I turned around, I said I have a witness here, and this is not going to go well for you, and it calmed him the fuck
down. So the couple tickets that I've gotten, every fucking time they always call in extra units, and I guess I must look like I'm strung out or something if I'm coming off my Adderall or whatever. Because so here's the thing. I went back to my parents' place after doing practice one night. So I played a sport in undergrad, and I was driving back to campus, and I was the brilliant genius who decided to pass a cop.
Wow.
By the way, don't ever do. I didn't realize at the time. I was just like, I need to get home. I had dinner with family. It was nice. I want to go home. And I was on the way back to the dorms, and they pulled me over, and like. They brought in extra units. They did the canine sweep and everything. They said, we want to search your vehicle. And me, of course, you shouldn't ever consent to this shit without them pulling a dog on you.
Refuse consent.
But I went ahead and consented. I consented because I thought it was going to be funny. Because I just came back. My shit had been in the car. My gear was in the trunk since after practice. So it had been sitting in there festering from my sweat plus Florida atmosphere for hours. In the trunk of this Honda Accord. So they got to open that shit up and take a big old whiff and then poke around with their bare hands. I'm sure that never came off with washing. So I had a great time watching them dig through my shit in the trunk and find nothing. I'm sure they found a couple chemi textbooks and went, oh, and then left.
I've only had multiple units called on me once. But they absolutely, like, I used to get every 2 weeks, I'd have a cop pull me over and give me a ticket. And they pull you over, right? Because I lived in a poor area.
Right.
And I'm probably the least dangerous looking fella in the area, so that's probably why I got pulled over. But I literally, I got pulled over and got a ticket every 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks, I was going down to the courthouse and being like, this is fucking bullshit. What the hell is this shit? I got a ticket for traveling in the left-hand lane of a 2-lane highway, specifically because I was doing this because I'd almost had half a dozen truckers who were getting out at 1 a.m. from the friggin' bar, almost cleave my little Toyota Corolla in two. So I was like super paranoid about it. And the cop sits there and pulls me over, and I go, what did I do wrong? Like I knew that I was within the speed limit. I knew I had all the stuff. He said you were traveling in the left-hand lane. I'm like, that's a law? He's like, yup, here's your court date. And I'm like, what the fuck? I've had him pull up. I've had him pull up and sit there and tell me I have an out headlight, and you can actually see it reflecting off his badge. Like we all get the talk. It's a real thing that we all get. It's not.
When they pulled me over, they thought they were going to get a goddamn drug bust. That's what happens. They're pulling all those every time. They think you're going to get it.
It's cops are dicks, and when BLM goes out there and says, "Hey, cops are dicks," I am right there with them because cops are dicks.
It's like, duh.
Yeah.
At the same time, like you kind of need them around because sometimes they need to be the bigger dick than the dick you're shooting around.
That's exactly right. Because there are scarier assholes that live without consequences that you don't want to be anywhere near. Like, been in apartments where dudes are trying to come in through your door in the middle of the night, and you don't want to know who you want around. You want a cop right down the street. Well, because that guy goes away.
Well, the answer to that question is really you are your own first responder. But it is good to know that you have somebody that can clean up the situation if it gets ugly.
Well, that's the other thing is if you have a first responder coming up, and say you're not your own first responder, you have someone else showing up, you're waiting at best if you're lucky in a good police neighborhood, your best average you're looking for is 5 minutes for a response time.
Yep.
And unfortunately, if you have some dickhead in your apartment with a gun on him, 30 seconds is roughly your response time. That is going to keep you alive, and if that. So if you have some guy who's got to come 4.5 minutes after you've been shot and then call an ambulance, I'd rather. And this is a cliche, but you got to say it. I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. Fuck it. I'd rather live with someone else's death on my conscience than have to deal with the fact that I'd be dead.
Well, and I think that's true for most people. I don't think that's a crazy statement in any way, shape, or form.
There's obviously there's answer C to this where nobody dies, but like just push comes to shove.
You can't
if I'm in that situation.
That's just the nature of the world. There are some people that aren't going to back down, and sometimes you need to be somebody that doesn't back down either.
I'd much rather that I could find a way to get out of the house, run away, and then live, and have them live. Get the cops after them, have it resolved peacefully, etc. That's just not the way that reality works, unfortunately. There's always going to be there's always a situation, unfortunate as it is, sometimes where there's no way to get out of the corner you're backed into, and it's you or them. And I'd much rather have a situation like that where I'm armed and I could make it me rather than them.
Now, on that specific note, right now, it's pretty hard to find any of that equipment. But something you can find for really cheap is a 3D printer. And I absolutely recommend that you search Control-Pew.
Now, here's the other thing.
Everything you need to know.
On 3D printers, here's some recommendations for you. Since this is actually part of the stuff I've done for my thesis research, which is the composites and shit. For 3D printers, there is a wide variety of wonderful composites out there that will make you fantastically printed, very, very strong items. Just do 100% infill if you're trying to make something functional. And if you go for the composites, make sure that you understand that sometimes composites going to come with wear and tear. So, for instance, short fiber carbon fiber composites are going to shred up your nozzle. So you're going to get only so many good prints out of those versus just straight up PLA, which you'll have a nozzle that'll last 30 years with straight PLA.
That said, I will link. I'll get the link for you guys right now because this is really good. It's an all metal machined hot end made basically.
Yeah, so there's Hex. What the hell is it called? It's a Hex. Hex something or another is a great hot end, all metal. Goes up to.
Hot end. Yeah, I'll get you the link for that. It's the Pico Hybrid hot end. I'll get you the link right now. Actually, it's on Kickstarter.
Well, I know there's one that goes up to like 300 something degrees. In fact, actually, it's on my metal. My printer bought metal. It's the hot end goes. So one of the things I did for research is dealing with TLCPs. Don't worry about the acronym. But that plastic melts pretty hot. Okay, so that looks pretty good.
Yeah, it looks incredibly promising.
So some of the more advanced performance plastics, like for instance the glass fiber reinforced nylons that you get, like say a high quality drill, the plastic casing for the drill is probably going to be 30 weight percent glass fiber reinforced nylon 6.6 or nylon 6, and those kind of performance polymers. High impact polymers are really you're going to need to make something robust from a 3D printer, especially if you want to have some sort of high impact driving behind it. So, for instance, the breech of a device, you might want to use one of these high impact materials to hold a metal breech in place, because you're not going to want to use the polymer as a breech. A breech plate is what takes the impact.
Well, that's why I recommend checking out Control-Pew. I'll have a link to that in the show.
So a breech is simple.
You could guide there.
You could use a stack of like 4 quarters and get a decent breech. By the way, it'd be a shitty one overall.
Sure.
You probably only drive out like say a 22 reliably, but all things considered, 4 quarters is pretty damn cheap since you have $1 of reach, instead of having to machine something.
Man, I'm gonna have to.
There's also electrochemical machining, which has basically come an incredibly long way due to gun control.
Anyway, you're saying, Steve?
Oh, I'm gonna have to get my 3D printer operational. I always run into this. The fundamental problem I have with my 3D printer is I don't have any use to print anything. It's like
you can print all kinds of
what's that?
You can print all kinds of, so here's the first. What's the first thing you print with your 3D printer? All the fucking accessories that you wished you bought with it. So that's the first thing you should do. Is it's seriously like my printer bought Simple Metal. The first thing I printed for it was the feet for it, and then I printed the print head thing to make it easier to squish it down and load a new filament. Then I printed out the little cog you put on the front of it to rotate a new filament in. Then I printed out the little stand you can sit on top of the 2 poles to hold your filament. So like, all this kind of shit, it's basic, it's simple stuff, and it gets you to the point where you're competent with the 3D printer, where you know your settings work. So you can get all those kind of quirks out ahead of time just by practicing making parts, high quality prints for your device to make it more functional. And if you're ever trying to figure out like, why the hell would I print something, that is an excellent reason for you to do it, so you get to practice it.
Yeah, I mean, this is the future of manufacturing, and 3D printers are going to be a very common thing in people's homes in a not distant at all time.
Here's the thing: it's not the future of all manufacturing, but it is the most rapidly growing sector of manufacturing right now. And so about 40% of everything plastic around you is injection molded. That is the biggest section. That's by far the biggest sector of manufacturing. 3D printing going to grow very rapidly. Mainly because, and I was telling Steve about this, you can reduce your warehousing. If you say you make a car product, like you make a product line, all the replacement parts, virtually all the replacement parts for that product line are manufactured when that product is introduced or shortly before that product is introduced. So if you want to get a part for a 20-year-old car, you're looking at a part that is probably 20 years old. With 3D printers, you can order it that day, have it printed that day, and then pick it up that day. No warehousing costs except for the polymer pellets.
Well, actually, in this case, we could be talking about a part made out of even laser sintered metal powder.
SLS.
So, I mean, you could recreate the original part, to whatever specifications.
So in the industry jargon, what he's talking about there is selective laser sintering. So SLS, that's a type of printing that uses a really fine powdered metal, and it sweeps a little thin layer, uses a laser and a little mirror up the top to draw out a pattern, and then it goes to the next layer. SLA is the polymer fluid that is used to produce parts, and that's the other kind of generic plastic 3D printing.
That being said, too, there's a 1911. They sold actually a limited edition run of them.
Yeah.
That
I do want a 1911.
Years ago. I mean, this is years ago when I first heard the story. It was up to 10,000 rounds, and everything short of the springs.
Yeah.
Was 3D printed. Oh no, sorry. The springs and
the firing pin, right?
Magazine. No, firing pin.
Really?
Yeah, Inconel.
Wow.
A barrel as
well.
That's
impressive. That's awesome. Oh, well, wait. You're talking about 3D printed. You're talking about SLS though, right?
Yeah.
So here's the cool thing, and this is back when people were freaking out about the Liberator, which was making me laugh. So in 2015, I went to the NPE Amtech trade show. I went to the NPE Amtech trade show in 2015. I was walking back with a colleague to the academic side of things, the SPE conference, and I had my hand out to the side. I was expounding on something, and a guy slapped the lower receiver and handle of a Glock in my hand, a Glock 9mm in my hand, stainless steel. He said that was printed this morning. I just looked at him because the thing was, the inside wasn't polished up, but the outside was polished to a freaking mirror finish, and it was just a gun. That was basically the part that makes it a gun is the lower receiver, right? So,
and that
was technically a gun he just printed.
If it comes down to the point where I need one, maybe I'll make myself one. But the reality is, I'd rather surround myself with friends who have much heavier armaments than I feel like spending.
Right.
You want to
have Gomer, right?
In terms of inventory and warehousing things, I would much rather have a friend who's got a guy who knows a closet than have that closet myself.
What you want is the gun nut from Tremors.
Oh, I've got like 3 of those guys.
Yeah,
I always make sure I'm within a 5-minute response time of one of those motherfuckers, because if the cops don't show up on time, they will.
Right. So you just tell them, "Hey, game time," and they're like, "All right, I'm armed."
Well, no, they you say it's game time, and they go, "Oh, how big around you need?"
Mm-hmm. No, they just show up and they pull down the back of their truck and they say, "All right, I got the 12, I got the 9, I got the 10."
Yeah.
So, are you looking for short, long, or medium range here?
These guys show up and it's like the Men in Black weapons closet, and you're just like, "This is really a gun?" They go, "Oh yeah, this was made this year, and it was only 5 of them."
Dude, did you see that there's that Demolition Man video recently? The one where he pretends to get pulled over by a cop. He's just like, the cop's like, "All right, sir, do you have any guns in the car?" And he just keeps pulling guns out. And he goes around to the back and he keeps going larger and larger bore. And he's like, "What's this one? Oh, this is my Barrett." And then at the end, he's just like, "Well, sir, I still gotta cite you." And he just runs because, like, I guess he just crossed a state border or whatever is the kind of the joke that's involved.
Yeah,
but it's funny because the cop just keeps saying, "Is that all?" He's like, "No."
I have seen and held a Barrett 50 cal because one of my buddies wanted one.
Oh God, I want one so bad.
So that's a $10,000 gun.
It's $100 round. Like, so.
Yeah,
no, they aren't.
I asked him, like, we were gonna go shooting one day. I'm like, "Bring the Barrett." He goes, "No, you're not that good of a friend." I'm like, "Oh."
So my little brother went and shot one at a range because I guess they had one at the range, and all you had to do was pay for the ammo, basically. And I guess so that meant he got to shoot a couple of hundo rounds, and apparently it was worth the money to fire the damn thing. I was like, "Oh, you piece of shit!"
I'm sure it is.
I imagine it really is. I would love to have one of those things myself.
Well,
but yeah, $10,000 and that license is just
license.
You
need a nice you need a heavy, pretty heavy license on that.
Nope. No license to drive to the store and buy it. That's
ideally that's what I would say too. Unfortunately, the reality is that if you want to get one of those things, you have to go and get fingerprinted and all that kind of shit. All.
Yeah,
not even remotely. You can buy as many 50s as you can 9mm. Were you not aware?
I don't think so.
Now, if you're in California or New Jersey, then that's an issue. But otherwise, no, you can own a 50 cal. It's the same as anything else.
That's under the federal.
No, it's not a destructive device. It's
not so sad thing. Actually, my little brother, he's actually out in California. He's looking to get the fuck out of there. Thank God. But he's over in California right now, and he actually he has a couple guns, and if you didn't know, the federal limit on magazine size is 10 due to the fucking shit that Biden signed back in the 90s.
Well, not
even though it's expired, California decided to double down on that crap and make the limit on the magazine size 7. So
we
he actually
have that in New York too.
He had to leave his fucking magazines back with my parents when they did that because it was illegal to possess them, even if you already owned them. There's no grandfathering or any of that shit.
Well, no, for a long time there were grandfathered in, but then in the past, I want to say 6 years, they took out the grandfathering, so people had to get rid of them.
That's just disgusting.
Oh yeah, no, it's garbage.
Yeah.
It's like, you already own the thing. Are you going to do this?
A lot of the states pass their own laws, right? So New York has the SAFE Act. Right. And the SAFE Act did that, but it was so broad. It was actually kind of funny because the police couldn't even carry a firearm in the state of New York for a little while because they didn't actually have an exemption for anything. It was just straight up.
Yeah.
So you have to have a 7-round magazine, and nobody made 7-round magazines. It was really funny. It was pretty great.
Oh, and speaking of hot ends, actually, one of the things I ended up doing in grad school was designing a hot end for a 3D printer. That was so the people a couple floors above me, they were doing. They had a senior design project for some undergrads, and another guy in grad school, another PhD guy, doing the head of the project. And so they came down and talked to us in our lab because we had kind of the expertise they needed at the time. And so I just actually ended up designing the hot end for a 6-axis printer. And then the guy upstairs, when I had to program it, he had to add in some Marlin firmware. But the Marlin firmware is really extensible. You can add in your custom M commands pretty easily. But originally they were using this thing at like it was a melding gun to weld together polyethylene or HDP panels. And the problem was that thing is a mini extruder, and the stuff we made is like fiber reinforcement that's continuous. So to put it into this thing, it chops the strand up automatically to make pellets. It's like, oh well, that's the precise opposite of what you want to do with our material. So we had to start from scratch and make our own hot end. So I ended up making the hot end, but I designed it and then had one of the undergrads throw it into a mesh thing and do a little bit of thermal analysis on it. It turns out it was perfect as we thought.
Oh, right on. Oh, that's cool.
And then we had, then we actually had like parts of it. We had it made, and the damn thing worked just fine. I was ecstatic.
Well, I can't imagine being an engineer and having something designed and worked in one shot is going to be anything less than kind of a whole.
It was fucking phenomenal. Like you had to do 2 iterations on the hot end design itself, just because the metal work that was involved was kind of intricate, and we needed to reduce certain things to make it easier to put through a lathe and whatnot. Like the undergrad lathed it out. Like it was all handmade in our group of people. It was pretty awesome.
Oh, that is pretty slick. Oh, but this one I've linked you up. It goes to 240C. Sweet.
So, the stuff I worked with,
that's quite impressive.
So the TLCP stuff I work with, of the range of them that I used, the lowest melted at 280 degrees C. And then the hottest one melted at 350.
Whew.
So, not quite amenable to that hot end. Actually, it was at the upper end of the hot end I have on my printer about simple metal. That thing tops out at 300C.
Yeah, I think these guys are trying to get an ultra...
But it's not hard to get them hotter. Part of one of the main limitations is how you're heating the thing. So if you're just using a one jacketed cartridge on the one side, then the thermal difference across a collar that you're going to have is significant enough to burn material if you're not careful. So what you need is to have multiple heaters around the thing and around the barrel for the hot end.
On that note, actually, if you've still got the Kickstarter up, they've got an upgrade that they're wanting to come out with shortly after this, a 500 degree. That looks like it's a full surround for the hot end that they make, and that sounds like that could really be a complete game changer for the home 3D printer.
500C is no joke.
I mean, that's going to get you into some of the most advanced materials, and if you're working with a high-end metal that's not going to abrade all that quick, you can...
So it's interesting. So
you can make near durable goods at home with something like that.
So if you're just printing polymer, being able to get above 300 degrees C. So here's what you have to consider: the way you control these things is basically by doing orders of magnitude analysis to get rid of the transient issues. So basically, so there's a thing called a diffusion length. And there's a thermal version of this. That's a similar idea, and you just think of the thermal conductivity as being like diffusivity. So there's again something like a diffusion length inside a thermal system, and basically that's how easily a heat source can see a heat sink. Just to keep things simple. So if I change the temperature suddenly somewhere, if it's something else is within one diffusion length of that change, then that something else is going to be able to see the change quickly. So if you're more diffusion lengths away, then it's going to take longer and longer for you to be able to see a sudden change. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I'm kind of lacking a.
Well, think of it like this: imagine that you're out in fog.
Yeah.
Imagine you're out in fog. The further away something is, if you're walking at constant speed forward.
Oh, okay. So you're looking at orders of magnitude. I think I understand. So
yeah, it's kind of like orders of magnitude.
Less effective, or less visible, or less.
So you want to have
what have you.
So you want to have stuff that you're going to try and heat, like within the diffusion length of your source.
Yeah, like putting your hand above an electric warmer, you know.
Right, yeah. The further away you are, the longer it takes your hand to see the heat. Yeah. All right, all on the same page. So what you do with orders of magnitude design is you basically, so the control of something is going to say, okay, if I want to adjust the temperature in the nozzle, say I have the thermocouple right on the nozzle and I have the heat source more than a diffusion length away. If my heat source is not like gigantic, then I'm not going to be able to overcome that distance, that thermal distance quickly and get stable control. So if you beef it up so that your heat source is able to just kind of flash, so to speak, the barrel with extra heat and get temperature changes. So you think like this. All right, if I have a tack hammer or if I have a tack nail and I use a tack hammer, it's going to take me several strikes to get it in. But let's just suppose that I have really good aim and the nail can only go one direction. It can't bend. Then if I use a mallet, a 3.5-pound mallet, I can drive the fucker in one shot, right?
Sure.
Every time, no matter how that nail is placed on different surfaces, until I get to the point where the nail is not harder than the surface I'm driving it into, a big-ass mallet's going to get it in every time. So that's the kind of power of 10 design principle, is you want to have an order of magnitude difference between the thing you're controlling and the thing you're controlling it with.
Oh, that makes sense.
So if I want to heat up the stuff inside the barrel, I want to know that given the mass flow rate coming through and the difference in temperature I go for, I want to know that I can achieve that difference many times over, between the residence time of the barrel and the diffusion length from the heat source and the heat sink. I want to be able to flash that temperature difference easily. And so that design principle allows you to get away with a whole lot. The main deviation from product design and effective product design is going to be cost in that regard. So that's why a lot of times you'll see a single cartridge heater hanging out to the side of one of these nozzles, and that's just not very effective at getting heat into the plastic, but it is dirt cheap. So what we did was we put 6 cartridge heaters around the barrel, and we got very effective heat transfer. But then again, this thing was big. You know, it's about the size of my fist. So unfortunately, not good for a small 3D printer.
Yeah, this thing looks to be a little bit fatter than a quarter at most, and as tall as maybe 6 of them stacked.
So if they put a decent cartridge heater in there, then they probably get good. That whole Power 10 thing is probably what they're getting. And looking down there where it says easy, safe, toolless, blah blah blah, and they show the nozzle, you can actually see the heater on the side sticking in at like 90 degrees.
Oh yeah.
So that's a cartridge heater. So that's the kind of heater I'm talking about. So that right there is typical of a design where they don't really go for kind of a maximal efficiency on this thing. They just kind of jam a cartridge heater on the side of it. And so the main problem you have here, especially you can notice there's all that cartridge sticking out. You're not supposed to do that ever, because that gets hot. And unfortunately, conduction is much better at transferring heat than convection and radiation. So the other part of the cartridge is conducting heat through the metal into the hot end, whereas that stuff sticking out is limited by convection. So you get this thermal differential across the cartridge, and that can crack the stuff inside. And if it cracks in the wrong way, it'll shear the metal that's actually heating up the inside. And if that shears, it breaks the connection, and it breaks the cartridge. So you have to heat those up very carefully if you have air exposure like that, and you're just not supposed to have it in the first place.
Well, they're offering a 1-year warranty, so they must be pretty.
Well, I mean, if they heat it up slowly, or if it's a beefy enough cartridge heater and they're only heating up a little bit, then I guess it's okay. But real careful with that kind of assembly.
Time. I mean, it's a brand new thing, and it looks like their upgrade doesn't appear to be much different. I only see 1 input, or maybe 2.
Let's see. So they have a silicone insulator, okay. Aluminum heat block. Aluminum's good, depending on the aluminum. I'm assuming it's the right kind. And then the nozzle, I don't know what the nozzle is.
They've got brass and stainless.
Brass and steel. So, okay, A2 steel at least. Yeah. So brass is a good thermal conductor. So here's the annoyance thing with steel. Regular old steel is so iron has a thermal conductivity of like 54. Copper has like a thermal conductivity of 400, just for reference here. Silver is like 360. Styrofoam plastic, or styrofoam foamed up plastic, the insulator, has a thermal conductivity of around 0.1. Stainless steel, unlike regular steel and iron, has a thermal conductivity of 16, about 1/4 that of steel and iron. So stainless steel is not good as a thermal conductor. It's actually it's a shitty insulator, but it's an insulator.
Yeah, A2 is a tool steel, I think.
Right. So A2 steel is still okay at conducting heat, if memory serves.
Just to clarify on that too, most tool steels are going to be higher carbon steels.
Now here's another thing. A2 steel, I'm assuming they're using A2 Vega. A2 steel is air hardening, so you don't have to put this through an oil bath hardening step. All you have to do is get it really freaking hot and then let it sit there, cool off slowly or whatever. It'll reorganize internally and harden up. So that's actually I've used this extensively for making molds and shit for the research work. So it's great for that. It also machines really well.
I can tell they went with it then.
Yeah, so it's fantastic. So when I go and talk to the machinists, you try to get parts that are close to the dimensions you want, and you also try to make stuff that easily machines well, easily is machined, and also will stand up to the rigors of what you're going to do with it. So when I use a hot press, I basically need stuff that's not going to warp under a significant amount of heat and pressure. And A2 steel fits the bill after you run it through a cycle of heating at the beginning. Although you have to do it unlike I did with 2 of my 3 molds. I was stupid. I decided to go ahead and do the full heat treat on a couple molds, and I forgot to put the little fucking ball on the chimney of the assay oven. So the little ball you stick on top prevents oxygen from getting in.
Oh, okay.
So I forgot to run the oven hypoxic, and so what happened was, of course, surface oxidized because because what you're supposed to do is crank it up to 1500 degrees.
So you can't have any of that surface oxidization.
Right. So I need flats. It was machined flat. I needed it to remain flat for sake of consistency in the experiments, because I was basically creating plaques, flat plaques, and they need to have a consistent cross-sectional area in terms of volume, in terms of the size and shape. And unfortunately, having oxidation completely fucked that up. Oh, yeah. I felt really bad about it. But the point is, so the idea is to air harden it, and to do that, you bring it up to 1500 degrees, then you hold it for like an hour and a half, and then you bring it down. And so I went ahead and did that, and I forgot to put the ball in the chimney, and that totally fucked it up. I scrubbed them off, and they were still kind of okay to use for some kind of parts, but not for molds anymore, unfortunately. No, but that's why I got 3 of them made.
I see. Yeah, the only thing you could do from there would be to have it precision ground, but if it's a mold, you've got...
Oh, well, the thing is I just hardened it. The problem was I just hardened it in the oven, so to machine it again would require me to use even harder tools, and it would have to go way slower.
Well, no, you can actually get a lot of that precision ground when you get up to that, because it's just a better and easier way. You just use abrasives as opposed to...
Well, yeah, so... The easier way to do it was just to get more of them made.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just saying there's always solutions. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. You're an engineer, but there's...
No, it's not just that there's always solutions. It's that there's always more than one way to skin a cat.
Indeed, I take offense to that on a personal level.
Look, you can always put the skin back on. It'll wake up and feel a little funny, but...
on that note, just to get back onto Shkreli, he was talking about some really wild stuff right before they locked him up, like investigating reviving necrotic flesh and some really, really wild stuff. The end result was that there was he was trying with a not even troll level, but a genuine concerted effort to potentially revive Harambe.
Oh my god. Dude, that would have been amazing, zombie Harambe.
Yes.
That would be...
So I actually regretted in 2016 not voting for Harambe, given where my vote was being counted. Because, quite frankly, and again, in this election, it also similarly didn't really matter as far as the presidential vote. But, So apparently, of like the 15-odd thousand people that voted for Harambe, like 11,000 of them were in Florida.
I'm unsurprised by that for some reason.
I shit you not.
Wow.
So I was sitting there after I found this out from so it was funny. So another person I know is from like Melbourne, Florida, and he was talking to his girlfriend at the time about it. She was like very upset about it. He said, "Well, I wish I would have voted for Harambe," and she got all pissed. So because she was just mortified that 11,000 people voted for Harambe. Like, where do they get her out? You know what? Hillary Clinton didn't lose by that much. Where do they get off doing this shit? It's like, yeah, 11,000 votes would not have done it, all right? But yeah, it would have been a closer race, fine.
Barely, though, right? Like, it wouldn't have just been there. It's like, you start digging into the electoral college win that he had, he could have lost Florida and still been okay.
Right. But like, at the same time, though, like, he didn't win Florida by that much, but it was more than 11,000 votes. You know, it was more than the loss to Harambe and the Bernie Bros.
I would. What is the concern there in the fact that Hillary, like, who's really upset about that? That's what I'm curious about.
Well, the girlfriend at the time was very much upset that he found it funny that Harambe got 11,000 votes in Florida.
I thought you were talking about Huma when you said the girlfriend at the time. My bad.
Ooh.
Yeah, deep cut there, right?
Yeah, Huma Abedin.
Oh my god.
The AOC lookalike that followed Hillary around everywhere like a fucking used tampon.
So wasn't she? She was the one that was a fan of Wiener there.
Yeah, she was Anthony Weiner's plaything.
She did,
and
it was her. And you know, she didn't like Wiener so much after she got with Hillary. So Huma's login was used on Wiener's laptop, which is why 650,000 emails were found on his laptop. Because she would want to print shit out at home, and he would comply.
You know, I every single time I go back to this, coming from somebody who has a clearance and deals with like the security associated with it, I have no idea how a private server was set up. I can't even comprehend the level of complexity that went into doing that. To say that it was a mistake or anything like that just goes out the water. But
all the complexity was in the mental gymnastics that were involved. It's really easy to set a server.
Well, it's not as much when you're talking about classified network. Those things are like behind firewalls of death because they're constantly under attack.
Yeah, well, let's look at Deborah Noodlehair, who's down in Florida. Her and her what was it, Pakistani tech workers who fled the country after they got implicated.
But what really bothered me about that is if Hillary had just stuck with,
they left.
Yeah, okay.
If Clinton had just stuck with they overclassify information, I think a lot of people would have been okay with that. But then she was going, "Oh, I deleted 33,000 yoga recipes or whatever the frig it was," and you're like, "What? What the fuck's wrong with you?"
My favorite part was that they found them on the phone, they lost them, they found them again later, and that magically disappeared. And then they all showed up again on the fucking laptop. I was sitting there going, "All right, you guys, there's a level of incompetence that's about to arrive here that I'm not prepared for you to lose the shit a third time. Just go ahead, tell me now, you know."
Well,
when we talk about Hunter's laptop, you know, this must be the difference between the private and public sector, because Hunter Biden's laptop has to be the first piece of damning evidence that the Democrats haven't had a hard drive go corrupt on them just before it was required by Congress.
Well, the thing is, like, not only did they have a copy of it, but the FBI sat on it for a whole fucking year.
Yeah. They've had this information for some while.
They had this info since like what, December of last year.
Yeah,
like they basically sat on it for a year. They opened up an investigation. They didn't do shit on it, and now when you inquire about it, they can't talk to you about it because it's an open investigation. It's like, well, they need to conclude it, assholes.
Well, I think the bigger question here, right, is actually lies with the media. This is of all the things that we could talk about, right? Because there's one thing that engineers do, and this is what we do really well. When everybody wants to know what we do as an engineer, you can argue on one hand we're glorified calculators, But the real that's what a lot of what we do.
Pretty good. All right.
A lot of what we know is glorified calculator. But the key is to sort fact from fiction, truth from.
I would argue right here that these are one and the same.
Yes and no.
Because you have to be able to tell whether or not one side of the equal sign is equal to the other, and it's either bullshit or it isn't. But it's either someone decided to use an extra bit of decimals that don't need to be there.
When you come out of the academic space, right, and you go to work in the real world, the first and most important lesson that you can have as an engineer is to go to the fucking source document. The rest of it does not matter. It doesn't matter what your calculation shows or what they say. You have to go to the source documents and you got to read them. And so when you start talking about the Russia investigation, all this other stuff, the reason I didn't believe it was there was no source documents.
There was a source document. There was a source document. It was firmly up Christopher Steele's ass.
Well, that wasn't really a source document, though, right? There's no actual discussion. It
was tightly rolled.
And then it bowed up.
It was tightly rolled up, and it was jammed.
But that's
The thing that is stunning about the media and the Hunter Biden laptop story is not the fact that, like, Hunter Biden did sketchy shit, because we kind of knew he did sketchy shit. Like, this is not really a surprise to anybody other than the mainstream media. But they're turning around and they're saying, oh my God, we have no way of confirming this. And you're like, dude, we have a trail. Like, this has got to be the most well-documented scandal in history. Like, there is nothing. We have signatures. We have a laptop. We have emails. We have data of that emails.
We have corroborating evidence.
Confirm it. We have corroborating evidence. We have people who come out and say, "You're going, oh, we can't confirm that
at the time."
What is wrong
we have witnesses. We have witnesses who know the people well, have a documented history of being with them, and are willing to say things. Have submitted devices to the FBI. We have forensics on the emails that have confirmed that they're legitimate. We have forensics on the fucking devices that say they're legitimate.
We have a document trail, a series. You can confirm it at literally every level of the story. This is probably the only time you ever get a scandal documented this well, right? And they're going, "Oh my God, we can't verify it." I'm like, "What is wrong with people? You ran Russia for 3 years."
No. My favorite is reading the transcript to the 60 Minutes interview with Trump.
Oh, I didn't even dig into that. I haven't had time.
Where she just says, "Well, we can't verify that," and he's like, "No, you can't." She goes, "No, we can't." This lady willfully is denying reality at this point, and Trump's just like Trump can be a dumb fuck and he can be an asshole, but he is just precisely the opposite of both of these in this interview, and that's in this specific instance. He's absolutely within his rights to call this shit out because it's so well and clearly documented.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, I understand arguing that, like, none of the skepticism that comes around the Hunter Biden's laptop has been in the media for the last, 4 years.
Yeah, none of it.
It hasn't existed. There has been no...
No, you're wrong. If the skepticism has existed, it has been whether or not Hillary Clinton's deleted emails matter.
Maybe you could call that, but
I don't know if that's skepticism.
Those weren't
outright
deleted,
campaigning.
They were acid washed.
No, bleached it. It's not acid.
Oh, right.
Sorry,
back
in the day,
software branding.
Back in the day, data security was done with Derek's Booten nuke, but I guess we've moved beyond that now to something that's not.
Well, I remember also having what was something that was called the incinerator, which is a fantastic piece of software which would do bit level overwrites. But you could do the military requirement of 7 overwrites, or you could go all the way up to 1,000. Well, sorry, 999.
Oh, so Derek's Booten nuke went way beyond that, right? A lot of the other programs, you're right, they do overrides, but Derek's
you did random writes and stuff like that too.
Right. So they would basically mask the information and change it, but then you could sit there and you could try to retrieve it from some of the ones and zeros. Derek's Booten nuke goes through and changes every single digit on the hard drive to 0. It takes forever to run, but every single bit, every single.
I know the kind of software you're talking about. There's fantastic commercial availability. Especially Linus Tech Tips did a video on one recently. It's like this deletion key that you can get. It's a useful thing. there's plenty of free implementations and yada yada yada. But the one he was showing was actually pretty snazzy. The UI for it was really cool because it was a boot menu, and then it gave you options for like not fucking it up. I told you before about my history with doing things I wasn't supposed to back in the 90s. And that was one of my favorite ones. That was one of my favorite ones to do. Was to have a boot MBR override that would just wipe inserted media.
Ooh.
Yeah. And that's unrecoverable. Is the fun part.
I just what I've always believed that the Democratic Party is a bunch of pussy magnets. They're all a bunch of pussies, and they must have a galvanic personality because all of the data around them just gets corrupted just magically. So that's all I can say on that.
Well,
a galvanic personality.
Excellent article. You guys are going to get a real kick out of this one.
Oh boy.
It's from the very, very reputable Vox.com.
Oh, this. So so actually I believe it was what, like 30,000, 18,000, something like that was another article. That was on the Twitter trending. Here. So the always accurate Vox.com.
All we can say to this is Black Lives Matter does not spread COVID, but rallies do.
Well,
that's all you need to know.
Well,
a whole fucking summer of this shit where they weren't masked. So here's the funny thing: they keep saying they were wearing masks. You look at the pictures of them; about half of them aren't wearing masks, and of the people wearing masks, about 3/4 of them have them down below their fucking nose, off to the side, on their fucking foreheads, shit like that. Like, it's just, you don't give me that shit if you're not going to wear it right. And then, of course, they're also wearing cloth masks. They're wearing ASTM level 1s around a whole bunch of people who are going to infect them. So they're not going to infect other people, fine. But they're going to get infected by other people.
Well, then
like ASTM level 1 does not protect you.
Well, I still, I still stand opposed to the whole entire thing. But either way, at the end of the day, you put a whole bunch of people in a spot. At least a handful of them are going to be infected, and they're going to spread. And that's that. The reality is, when you come out and you say that Trump rallies are super spreader events, but Black Lives Matter rallies aren't, that's just like it basically it takes away the credibility of your side.
Now there's something else big here. There's something else major that we have to consider. So you mentioned this kind of in passing as part of it. It's not just that you have a bunch of people show up. It's that you have to have them show up repeatedly to have a super spreading event like this.
That's true.
So you have a bunch of people show up. So say you have one person show up who's infected. They're going to infect, maybe 20, 30 people total. You have to have that same number of people come back again after their incubation period has reached the infection stage. So once they've gotten to the point where they're shedding viruses, then they're infecting other people. That takes days, a couple days, but it takes days to happen. And when that starts happening, then you can start talking about major spreadings happening. Because then you go from like 20-odd people to like 400 or 1,000.
So, like, say, for instance, if Trump had, I don't know, just as a complete out-of-the-air example, he happened to do rallies for 100 days in Portland.
In the same location.
Yeah.
In the same location, yeah, sure.
Say he did, rallies for 100 days in the city of Portland. Do you think that...
Wait, when you actually dig into this article, this is all bullshit. Like, it's all bullshit all the way down.
Well, it's Vox. I'm not really expecting journalism.
No, but I mean, like we're talking about research. This isn't that they documented 700 deaths and then they can attribute that to Trump rallies.
Yeah, they did a model, I bet, right?
Basically they've turned... I'm not sure if it's a model. They basically turned around and evaluated the counties in which Trump has held rallies.
Well, there's this thing in
the counties outside of that.
There was this thing in the Twitter Explorer that attributed, and this is earlier today, I think, that attributed 30-odd thousand deaths or cases or whatever. Doesn't matter. They attributed 30,000 somethings to these rallies. I'm just wondering, well, if you guys have done any of the same bullshit analysis on the other events that have been occurring, then you might have come to a conclusion that makes you look not so smart. Oh no, so this is the right one then. You have 30,000 incremental confirmed cases and then likely 700 deaths. So this is the same one.
Yeah, for rallies held between June 20th and September 22nd.
Yeah. This is just horseshit. Sorry,
it's,
fine.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Fine, if trickle down effects, 30,000, fine. I can buy it. 700 deaths, I might even be able to buy that. But you are so focused on the small potatoes here.
Well, they're doing this in so they did it in 18 counties. So that's their sample size is 18. Right. They're only doing it in majorly populated counties, and then comparing the total number of infection in the host counties as compared with similar counties that did not host a rally. So, I mean, first off, comparable counties that did not host a rally. Does that mean you're surrounding rural zones, or does that mean?
Well, here's my guess. My guess is they also did proportional analysis instead of logarithmic. So instead of just doing a scaling by proportion to normalize for density of population, I'm guessing they didn't even normalize for density. They just probably normalized for overall population numbers. So
I don't know. It doesn't say what they chose to normalize.
I'm just guessing here for the speed with which this came out and the stupidity with which I'm detecting.
Oh yeah, I'm not seeing
right off the bat
here either on this thing.
My guess is that they didn't normalize their population density. If they did normalization, they probably did proportional scaling instead of logarithmic scaling. So they didn't even get a reasonable factor for the spread.
Oh, I found the paper. It's on GitHub.
Oh boy.
Do we want to actually? And then you go through this, like, the Trump rallies have led to more than 700 deaths. First off, they say that that's not necessarily among attendees. That's like branch chaining out, which is that's all kinds of. First off, none of this is data. This is all modeling. None of this is actual hard data. This is all modeling. And let's go with that. Let's accept.
This is the one I was looking at earlier.
And I will counter that with what Cuomo did in New York.
This is a Stanford paper out of the economics department, by the way. So while I believe they're good with numbers, I don't believe they're good with detecting their basal premises and actually normalizing appropriately.
Well, the problem, right? So this comes down to I was talking. I think I don't know whether it was here or we were talking about this, but one of the things that really irks me about epidemiology papers is they use these very broad-based statistics. And they make a shitload of assumptions, and then they sit there and they just blurt out these assumptions without
they demand applicability. It doesn't happen.
And when you start talking about people who are going after whether it's climate change or the CDC's gun statistics or whatever it is, at the end of the day, what skeptics are doing when they go in and they attack these papers and they attack these politically motivated scientists, they are hardcore testing the assumption. That's what we're doing. Right? We assume that they are capable of basic math. That is not the assumption that they aren't capable of math. The question is whether these assumptions hold up, and it looks like they don't. It looks like
here's another thing. Let's consider proportionality. Let's consider the scaling of things here.
Yeah.
They say in their introduction, the first sentence, as of this writing, more than 8.7 million Americans have contracted the disease, resulting. And I'm just going to skip some of the words here. Contracted COVID-19, resulting in more than 225,000 deaths. Dong et al. 2020. Fine. Let's just stop right there and just consider the scope and scale of things. 8.7 million infections. They're talking about 30,000 maybe.
Yeah, that's
225,000 deaths. They're talking about 700 maybe.
Yep.
Maybe. And this is, again, it's going to come down to modeling later on. They're going to be looking at comparative regions, and they're going to be making a big assumption here that they are similar. And if they talk about similarity is going to come in the mathematical sense here, where you can either do some kind of scaling to make the two values be the same, and then assume that there's going to be some excess due to an event, a particular event. And then you're also going to have to make the assumption that they are separable, as in, without that event happening, the number difference would not exist. And then on top of that, you have to assume a particular type of scaling, which is what I was talking about with proportional earlier, meaning that there's some multiple factor that's going to increase the size of these numbers given an event existed. Or you have to have another kind of scaling, like say logarithmic, where you take the log of the values and then take the difference of the logs of the values. And then while that might seem like it's just proportional, you can also have a cofactor on the log there. So if you do it as a linear shift in log space, it's no longer just proportional. It can also be like quadratic or anywhere in between. So there's other ways of doing scaling. So they have to assume a scaling. They have to assume a similarity in the region. they have to assume an impact due to a specific event that is also separable. So if it's not separable, then that means that the shift that they're going to be looking at may or may not be linear in any space.
So the way they identified comparable counties was based on the trajectory of confirmed cases prior to the rally date. That's a weird metric.
Well, that seems somewhat reasonable, though, doesn't it?
It does. It does seem reasonable.
So here's the other thing you have to consider now is, all right, were they normalized by density of population? Not just by population, but by the population density, because that is very important in epidemiology. And because it's in the Department of Economics paper, I don't think they did.
The next thing that they did was then estimate the statistical relationship among those counties between subsequent COVID-19 cases, various conditions such as pre-existing COVID-19 prevalence and pandemic.
Yeah, that's what they did. Okay. Then immediately, you don't have to believe them then.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, I want to.
It doesn't look like they normalized it in any way.
So I want to believe them on this, that this is actually a real effect that they could measure. But if they didn't normalize for something that's as basic in epidemiology as population density, then I have trouble with this.
So what they actually say is the standard error of each prediction is large, and so therefore they combine the estimates across events to obtain an average treatment effect.
Okay.
So basically it reads to me that they don't have sufficient data from any one of these events to say that there's anything statistically significant. Right. So they add them all up together and then said, hey, it's got to be statistically significant now.
Well, so here's the thing. You can actually draw statistical significance over a larger bit data set. The problem is now you have to start saying, all right, well, for a particular event, did you have a statistically significant effect? The answer is going to be no.
Right.
And that's the thing. Is if you pull from a larger set like this, and this is actually something I have to do for my work, so I'm intimately familiar with being fucked by this. Just to put it nicely, if you try to pull for a particular circumstance, on a distinct effect from a background like this, it's going to be very difficult to come up with something that gives you statistical significance. Whereas if you say, all right, the overall trend is going to be such and such. So the error bars on 700 deaths, for example, have got to be in the neighborhood of a quarter of that. Your RCI is going to be probably in the neighborhood of 0.2, 0.25.
Yeah, no, and then you see things. Their predictions employ few data for comparable county, whereas their epidemiological models do not. And actually, it looks like they specifically. So basically, they turned around and they set up a whole bunch of counties that they thought were comparable, and then they selected the ones that had the data that they wanted.
So here's the other side of this that's also got to be considered. Some of the other factors that may or may not be missing in their analysis, and again, that they did this work is a good thing. That they cherry picked their data in a certain way, at least so it's bad. But so the important thing is that they spell all this out. I can respect that they spelled out all these assumptions, and then it's a cute paper. Fine.
Yep. Yeah. Well, but I mean, again, by the time they're done,
it's a discussion, but.
But by the time this is one of the problems that you have is by the time you're done with all of your assumption, the paper's worthless.
So here's another.
That's the reality is.
Well, so it's the same. Sorry, here's the same kind of discussion, and this is the difference between chemists and chemical engineers. When you're doing shit in high school chemistry, everything's assumed to be homogeneous, and you know for a fucking fact it's not. So this is the same kind of thing. Is they're gonna have assumptions that are just non-realistic. But may or may not give you some sort of reasonable basal assumptions you can plow into something that's more complicated. So, okay, let's look at other things that they may or may not have considered. All right, so they consider the prevalence of mitigation measures that were involved. Who was wearing masks, who was not wearing masks, were they washing their hands regularly, were they staying indoors more often? Was there a big change in social mobility? Things like that.
It was looked after in that regard was just that specific event. There was no follow-up.
Right. So I'm not seeing. So they say the blah blah blah. A rally could become a quote super spreader event, which is a poorly defined term. So whenever you get behind a vague term like that, you have a big problem because you have to clearly define a boundary if you're going to go around a boundary and make a distinction. If you don't have a boundary that you can distinguish, for instance, let's say you have when you're looking at say a diode. And
actually, they talk specifically about what you were talking about there, right? If you go through the paper and talk specifically about the fact that one of the problems that they have is that there's actually a lot of heterogeneity between their cross-country sample, which means that you did realistically. If you're reading this, there's no way they got a meaningful. They probably just took a whole bunch of stuff, threw it all in a pot, and said, "Hey, this kind of looks like it worked."
Yeah, which is also, by the way, fine if that's what they said they did, and they did that, and they came out with a certain answer. It's fine. It's just, again, as you were also saying earlier, but there's an applicability issue here. Is it going to be actually applicable to future data? Does it have a predictive? Does it have predictive worth?
Well, I'm less concerned about predictive worth, but when we start talking about epidemiological, a lot of times they have very, very 18 test cases, right? And that's a very small
epidemiologists. These aren't epidemiologists. This is coming out of the Department of Economics at Stanford.
Yeah, it's all but they use, when I say that, I'm talking type studies, right? So this goes back to like PM 2.5, which is kind of a bullshit series, in the six city study. So they'll make these very broad claims on sample sizes that are typically less than 20, because that's what they can get for their data. And there's so many assumptions that get built into these models that by the time you're done, it's just about worthless. It may not be exactly worthless, but it's just about worthless.
Yeah, and so again, these are great preliminary studies. If you want to say we should study something more, then you can just showing there's a hint of something there is excellent. So, and as far as that goes, this is great for plowing into a new study and, say getting grant money to do a study. Fine.
It would have been interesting had they decided to do this and say the protests that were going over all summer, right? Like what is the incident rate there?
There's also more data to consider in these contexts where you have, so not only say those protests like the Antifa side of things, but also say the haircut Karens who said I want to get out of the home. That's also a valid group of people to look after, and I would blame all of these fuckers for the increases in incidents in their areas. And
well, I mean,
intuitively,
maybe.
And look, I fully agree that I should be able to leave the home and make my own fucking adult decisions.
My simple argument is that we have one method, and one method only to control a disease, and that is quarantine. And if you hit a certain level of people that escape quarantine, all bets are off. I mean, herd immunity is the inevitable approach. We are all eventually going to track this thing. You can dress it up however the fuck you want, but once you got beyond 12 cases in the United States, we were done, right?
Well,
like we're just done.
There are other. I would argue that even in a realistic scenario here, there are other ways to go about it. Fine. You can go down. You can pick your poison on this and say we're going to go down the road where everyone's going to get it eventually. Blah blah blah. Fine. And so I would say arguably there's other paths to go down, but if we just go down that road, then the major concern is that we're not going to flood hospitals.
Right,
and
exactly.
Right now, in our third peak, is that we are having problems. And the main reason that hospitals looked empty is you have to remember that epidemics travel along sigmoidal trajectories, and they have exponential phases. Exponential phases, as are by their name, nonlinear. And that's the main reason why you were seeing hospitals that looked empty. They were being empty. The whole point was to make it so that it should look like we overreacted if we did everything right. We should look like we did something really stupid. We paid a bunch of money for a result that was great, but we should, we can look back and point fingers and say, hey, this was dumb. Why did we do this? Maybe next time we don't need to do it, et cetera, et cetera. We want to be in that position.
We aren't.
That is the perfect place to be.
Right? Like
we're not. Right now we are terminally fucking ourselves by being confused about this being an end goal that we want to be in.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, that's the principal issue, right, is that we have never hit that point where we actually get to say, hey, was this really a problem or was it really a problem?
No, what we've been doing is doing that prematurely like idiots because, well idiots have power.
Again, you and I stands a little bit different here in our risk perspectives and risk tolerance on this issue. Right. But at the end of the day, right, we're not looking at something that is super crazy nasty. And the fact that we did all of these things. And so I guess we have two things on our plate, right? We either need to turn around and say that all of these things didn't work, or we can say that all of these things did work and that it's the only reason that it's, slowly spreading now.
So here's what I would say on this.
We're trying to live in this world of this is an absolute crisis, and simultaneously that all of the actions taken have been utterly useless.
So here's my main problem with the way that we've implemented things is we allowed politicians to have a major say in the way things were done and completely destroy the credibility of any authority that actually does have a positive impact. You know, for a great example is Adolf Schittmer up over in Michigan. You know, she decided that she was going to implement the lockdowns in a very, very, very partisan way, and then completely ignore all of them to go and have fun with her family over and wherever the fuck.
Well,
like, that is just asinine and completely immoral. And shit like that just needs not to happen. And now, whenever they decided they're going to have some sort of change in their lockdown procedures, they have to go back and say, okay, but fine, this bitch did this to us this time. What are we going to do differently this time? What assurances can you give us that we're not going to have more of this partisan bullshit that targets specific groups of people? And the fact is, they can't give any of those assurances because they've completely destroyed any of that credibility. Well, and then the problem is you have people like Fauci.
Holier than thou attitude too of the leadership, like I can and you cannot.
Like they also have assholes like Fauci, who, by the way, is not wrong when he says a lot of the stuff he says. But then he decides out of the blue he's going to be finally respective of his need to only give out official positions when he's in an official capacity, when he's sitting in front of Congress. But then he's going to go on shit like CNN and then bloviate in a personal capacity without distinguishing that he is not talking as a health health administrator. So well, I mean, when are you going to go on there and have
when you're talking, what you're talking about is the credibility of experts.
It's not just credibility. It's not just credibility. It's also the opinions that they're espousing. If you're going to be putting out a personal opinion in your when you're designated in your official role in a private space, like say a news network, and then try to hide behind your official capacity when you're in front of Congress, that is asinine. That also destroys the credibility of anything that you're saying that is credible. Like, that is actually reasonable or factual. If you're going to do that kind of shit and then just back out of your own... If you're just going to back out of your own positions, then why the hell should anybody listen to you, even if you're right?
I think less than that. I think the biggest issue that we have when we start talking about COVID and our response to it is that we turned around and we said 2 weeks to slow the spread. And you start looking at these states, right? And we're at
I said a month. I said a month at the very beginning of that, didn't I? I said you need at least a month, if not two.
Regardless of what you said,
right? I did. I was in charge.
The political folks turned around and they didn't back off, right?
No, here's the other thing: is I would say Trump put that up too. It'll be gone by Easter. Yeah, it wasn't, was it?
That's true. And I
know he was trying to be hopeful. He was trying to be positive. Exactly. I get that. And I fully agree that you should be upbeat about things. Yes. Try to get people through the hardest of this kind of stuff. But he didn't give a realistic message at that point, and that was the point, to give a realistic message, because that was pre-lockdown.
It wasn't for me, but whatever.
Well, pre-major lockdowns across the country. Yeah, you're in dipshit land. So
hey, you know what? Cuomo's a special case where he simps so hard for the Muslims he bans the Jews.
Yeah. The chosen people got chosen for being fucked over.
Oh my god. But I guess my issue is that we started with you start talking about lockdowns, right? And we say, hey, we're going to do 2 weeks on and then a few months off, and that's just to prevent us from overrunning our healthcare system, and we're going to get back to normal, and we're just going to keep on keeping on, and it's going to come back. And that was a very responsible way of talking about it, right? Because herd immunity is one option, right? And that's basically how you handle it so we don't get swamped. And both of those things are perfectly rational and reasonable, and we've turned it into let's cater to the cowards, where we're going to sit there and we're going to shut down the economy, we're going to shut down the country, and what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to create a massive welfare state and keep people going with federal spending.
All that shit is just beyond the pale. They're basically trying to... So like every other fucking thing, this entire administration, they're trying to ram through their Christmas list every time there's an opportunity. And this was a gigantic opportunity, and the Democrats couldn't fucking let one opportunity go by. Every crisis is one for them. So instead of being able to get...
Rahm Emanuel's immortal words, you don't let a crisis go to waste.
Right. And so instead of allowing something as simple as a targeted bill giving every American family or every American such and such amount of money, blah, 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 they can't even let that shit go through. They have to come in with welfare assistance bullshit for every one of the places that has had these riots because all of a sudden people have to pay for them.
Yep. Well, and I'm that's an issue. I think my biggest issue was that you start looking at places like New York or California, which lock down harder. If we're locked down for 2 weeks, that's one thing, right? That's one thing. You're going to start shutting down for 6 months, and then you need to sit there and start bailing people out. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take all of these people and you're going to provide them a massive we basically turned around and gave everybody a $50,000 a year salary as long as they stayed unemployed. And you wonder why the economy's in a shitter. Right? Like we basically market.
Here's the other thing. When they talk about lockdowns, this is the part that really pissed me off. This is also part of the credibility issue. When they talk about lockdowns, they didn't fucking lock down. They just kind of said, oh, well, some businesses are not allowed to exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, oh, you should stay in your home or else, there was no or else there. If you're going to make it so that it's not adults' decision to stay home, then you better do it right. Otherwise, you're just going to sit there and limp along. If they'd done a 2-month hard line, very detailed, and like if they just did a quarantine, if they did an actual quarantine for 2 months, this fucker would be gone. There'd be nothing of it left. It would be starved out.
Yeah, but I don't think that would be feasible. Right?
No, I'm not saying it's. I'm not absent feasibility, absent morality, or any of that shit.
Okay, all right. So we're going to let everybody Mad Max it out.
So yeah,
and you know the entirety of the world shuts down. We go to third world nation status for 2 months. We're going to ignore all that. Yeah, we could have sat there and beat COVID, and sure. I'll agree with you.
That's what I'm saying. There are specific circumstances which overcome this, and there are combinations of shades of gray which can still get it done, and we've magically managed to avoid every fucking one of them because politics.
Well, I think that again, you know what we should have done. I was for herd immunity at the beginning.
It's a nice place. You should have the nearest Chinese.
Herd immunity is not going to be a reasonable thing if it goes seasonal.
Well, that's the thing, right? So had we not turned around and done the thing that we did, had we gone for herd immunity, kept the whole thing open, we'd be done by now, right?
Well, that's the reality. That's the problem is we might still so. There's downstream effects, which are a major problem. This thing can hit you multiple times. Herd immunity.
I think they just came out and said that for the most part, you're one and done.
Here's the thing: in the current climate, where you are not likely to get exposed to it again, then sure. But if you just allowed things to be open and you had normal social mobility, if you came in contact with other people before 2 weeks or so after your infection has completely cleared. And we're talking 2 weeks to a month post-infection. I know it seems like it just keeps getting larger of a window, but it's 2 weeks to a month for your IgG. It's 2 weeks to a month for your IgG to build up to peak to reasonable values to fight off an infection. But if your viral load exceeds a threshold within that time, you're going to get infected again. It is not going to be something where you just fight it off in a day. It's another full-blown infection.
And maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the case, right? But at the end of the day,
I said if that's with normal social mobility, which means it's not likely to happen right now.
If we had turned around and gone for herd immunity, we'd be done by now.
We'd also have a lot more. We'd have a lot more dead people.
Not a ton. The percentages are not very high for that.
Keep in mind, we don't have a problem with our hospitals being overrun right now. Because we have private medicine. Because Italy didn't have that. Also, Italy got swamped without knowing what was happening because they had the fucking Hug a Chinese campaign. Uh-oh. So this is involved.
Uh-oh.
We were being too loud, weren't we?
No, just a little bit. He's just complaining.
Is the dog back in begging for crisps?
No, he's not here.
I like that dog. He has the right attitude. Bitch, give me a chip.
Actually, I do, though, I have some good news to kind of close us out on. We've got a new study coming out that the strong antibody response, resides for, on average, they're saying about 5 months. 3 to 5 months. So that's, it's not great,
good,
but that's
good.
decent.
So here's the average. This is just per my recollection. So don't quote me on this or give me ask for a paper. But this is what I've been saying for months. Also, for the human infectious members of coronavirus, the average peak immunity, so the peak concentration of IgG in the blood that occurs is about 3 months after infection, and the immunity lasts for about 2 years, 1 to 2 years. So if we're getting robust antibody response that's stable for at least 5 months, then that means peak immunity is probably happening later than 3 months, and we're probably going to have a longer term immunity. This is a condition in which Steve could be right about herd immunity actually being effective. Again, if it goes seasonal, we have a problem.
Yeah, but I mean,
we have a big problem.
Sure, but at the same time,
which allows people to be reinfected.
This hit in March. If
right.
we just
it's February, but anyway,
whatever. But sure, we're quibbling over a month. Yeah. At the end of the day, you're going to have time for it to race all the way through the population. Everything stays open. Nobody takes an economic hit. We still have a boom going on. The stock market's still going crazy, and we just go with it. Yes, there are shitty things that will happen.
So, Steve, you have to consider,
it would not go seasonal.
Here's the thing you have to consider. Well, that's inviting seasonal right off the bat. But that said, because you're inviting reservoir populations, all that said, you would have had a major economic crisis for some very obvious reasons here. Number one, hospital overrun. You'd have a lot of people who need to go to a hospital that can no longer go to one. Number two, lost productivity, in part because of reason number one, but also in part because just most of the people being sick. All that said, the more important thing is the longer term impacts. So the fact of the matter is, once you come back from this thing, there is a long list of sickly that are likely not to hit for a few months, let alone maybe a decade. And it's one of those things is the fact that you are now twice as likely to get a heart attack once you get this thing. Period. Overall, just period.
I'd have to see the data validating that. But at the end of the day, yes, there are nasty effects. That is a reality. Sure, absolutely.
It's generation crippling, is what I'm saying.
I don't think it would be. I think what we have done
there are shades of gray on
crippled the generation.
There are shades of gray on that, but what I'm saying is, the economic hit that we're talking about here is coupled to the medical hit, the health hit. Because when you have people that get sick, they don't go to work, or if they do go to work, they don't work as effectively, and they cost more as employees because they have healthcare concerns they have to cover.
Yes, there would be costs associated with having the disease.
Now that
the cost associated with having the disease is less than the costs of doing what we've done.
So if you look back at previous epidemics in the country that are of similar concern, this is one I would call a once in 100 years event. So this is like the 1918 event. But there's also the 1960.
Less severe than the 19.
Well, here's the thing. The difference between then and now is that we have better technology. We have better mitigation measures. So when I say it's the once in 100 year event and it's similar, I'm not saying that the relative severity to the population is going to be similar. What I'm saying is that the disease is similar in its severity to what's... So anyway. There's also the Hong Kong flu, which is 1967 or 68, right? If you look at the way that the economics worked out, the market takes a huge hit no matter what you do between these different events. And there's another one that was in the 50s, and then you have swine flu, Zika, etc. You can point to all these. You have a major drop in the economic metrics, but you also spring back pretty quickly.
Yes,
you regress to the mean very quickly, no matter what you do. Which is why in this last quarter, in quarter 3 of this year, we had a 33% growth in the which market was it? It was GDP or the stock market, whichever it was.
It's probably the stock market. It's pretty close to where it was.
We had the fastest growth that we'd ever have seen. And then economists were saying, oh, but that's slowing down. It's like, well, no shit, Sherlock. It's called regression to the mean.
Well, and I agree with all of the statements. But at the same time, just because the stock market sits there and goes up doesn't mean that we haven't decimated a ton of people.
Right. There are businesses that are not coming back.
I'm okay because I'm part of the defense industry, right? And so no matter what, I get paid. But at the same time, you start taking a look at some of these other folks who are not so well off. And yeah, we really do have to start talking about what are the negative impacts that we had to these people. And it's pretty significant.
Well, here's the thing: is
right?
They may or may not have been. They might have gotten like that anyway.
I don't think they would have, though, right? Like that hasn't happened.
If all their employees are sick, they would have had no employees to do the work. Look, so at a personal level here,
not everybody's going to get sick at the same time.
At a personal level here, I can also say, and this is anecdotal, so one instance here, so it's not going to be as relevant. And actually, I can say that it's more than one person, but I just, as a for instance, my girlfriend right now, thank God she's getting better, but for the last couple of weeks, I have barely been able to sleep because she's got the bug. It sucks,
She's got COVID?
She's yeah. Well, she hasn't gotten tested, but she had all the damn signs, anosmia and all that kind of good crap.
I'm pretty sure I had it back in like January. But...
So, well, get yourself tested because I'm curious about the numbers, and that kind of info is good for the epidemiologist anyway. If you got the insurance and shit,
I mean, again, I understand. I understand that there are personal impacts. And I understand that there are personal impacts that are going to be negative. The question is, how do we mitigate damage to the greatest extent possible?
What I'm saying about the economic impact,
what we've done,
she's been home from work because she couldn't work for weeks now.
Sure.
Which means that the productivity at work has not been replaced. And even if it has been replaced, the fact that she got exposed there while she's fairly well protected.
But take a look at what we did with how many people were out of work and for how long they were out of work, and that's longer than she'll be out of work. Yes, there is going to be a hit. When I say herd immunity, I'm not sitting there and thinking this is some rose-colored
I get it.
world
I get what you mean.
where everything is fucking amazing. But it's better than the alternative, which we're living through right now.
Well, what I've been arguing here is that the alternative is not a whole lot different because you're going to have this loss of productivity anyway.
You're going to have some productivity loss, but it's not going to be the same scale.
She's not only worried about being able to go back to work as if someone else has filled the role. Her job might not be there anymore because the business might have shut down because everyone got sick. Does that make sense?
I get what you're saying, but basically, we're talking about a 2-week period, right? That's roughly how long your infection lasts.
Well, right? No, she's only about halfway through with 2 weeks. Your infection lasts about a month. If you're not particularly lucky here, which means and a lot of people that are going to go through that.
But that's not a huge proportion. Percentage-wise, not a lot of people are going to go through. Percentage-wise, not a lot of people are.
So again, it depends on what kind of healthcare you have access to and what kind of situation you find yourself in. If you're capable of staying home with good medicine and with a job that's going to just kind of let you do what you need to do, if you can hammer it out in 2 weeks. You're lucky.
The majority of cases per the CDC are within 2 weeks. Yes, there are cases that go longer.
For resolution of the viral load, not for resolution of symptoms.
I mean, at the end of your 2 weeks, your viral load drops. Your symptoms will proceed to get better. We've all worked. We've all worked when we're coughing up phlegm and have like snot dribbles and snot rockets and do like tissue walruses and the whole bit. Like we've all been there, right? That's a real thing that we have to deal with. But the consequence for what we did do is worse than that. We have businesses that aren't coming back because we locked down to try to save the peoples.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Well, what I'm saying is that as the thing that you're saying, what I just said, there are businesses that are going to go out. Just because.
But I don't think that's going to happen when somebody's out for 2 weeks and then they come back. Even if they're at 80%, right? Even if they're only at 80% efficient, when they come back after their 2 weeks, that's still better than being closed for 6 months.
No, look, there's no argument that 2 weeks and 6 months are very different numbers here.
And how this kind of would go out logarithmically. It's the same kind of issue with a zombie apocalypse. You get a couple of people out, and then a couple of people more, and it's without the proper distance. You're going to be running into these exact issues. Where
by the way, for listeners who are wondering like why we're being loud and annoying towards each other, this is how you disagree with each other if you're doing stuff like STEM. Yes. At the end of the day, I don't hate him as a person. I just disagree with his opinion.
Are you sure? You sure you don't hate me? That's too bad.
Well, I don't hate you because you have a dog, and like I like dog people.
Okay. Well, that's fair.
I mean, you don't give the guy a fucking chip, so I mean, there is that.
Yeah, well,
I'm supporting a terrorist in your household.
Man, you want to know what? Like, so that dog, right? I was very drunk a couple nights ago, and so I left the chocolate baked goods out that my wife made. He downed enough of it that he was sick, and of all like so he was thrown up, and I was drunk, and so I'm coming out of bed like stumbling down because I think somebody's breaking into the house because there's weird noises, right? And I had no idea what it was. So he skittered all the way down the stairs. And man, he decided to throw up on the stairs. So I'm like trying to sneak downstairs to like take out whoever has decided to come after. I don't know what it is that they want to steal in my house, but whatever it is, I'm going to go take them on. And I slipped on the Hershey Highway from hell all the way down. I mean, I hit those stairs. Like I'm sitting here and like I turn on my side. I'm in pain. There was dog chocolate vomit on the ceiling of the lower stairs because it was just splattering as I went down the stairs. So it was a fun day. That's why the dog doesn't get chips. You feed him chips, and then he's gonna want some chocolate.
Yeah, if you give a mouse a cookie, I get it.
Yeah. But yeah, no, there's no hatred here. But these are on. This is how stuff goes over at work with me.
OANN, all right. So we got a real news network here.
Oh my god.
Mostly it's just...
I don't know. There's some of them I like. Some of the people that are there I like.
Well, specifically...
a lot of them I think are fucking nuts, but you know.
They're linked to some stuff here. I don't have anybody else that's really...
So do you prefer OANN or MSNBC?
OANN.
Oh, any day.
There's no contest.
Yeah, I mean... at least one's honest about where they're coming from.
MSCNN, BBC is all a horrible network. So just don't even get me started on that shit.
Pretty much. But I wanted to close on this because it's actually
that's like CRAM acronym.
Yeah. But I was wanting to close on this because it's another final bit of good news for people just as we're going into the end of the year.
All right. So Pfizer's trial.
Yeah. You know what I think is the funniest thing about the vaccine stuff is we turn around and they're all like, we have to stay, all of the Democratic governors are all, we have to stay locked down until a vaccine comes out. No. And then Trump sits there and talks about the vaccine during the debates, and they're like, oh no, we need to make sure it actually works before we sit there. And you're like, come on, guys.
Look, in principle, they're not wrong. It's just that they're very stupid people saying the right thing.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think
of course you want to make it
no less.
We're gonna get a vaccine, and that's what's gonna do it. And then all of a sudden, the second Trump says something about it,
they all become anti-vaxxers.
All of a sudden, vaccines are suspicious. Fuck.
So here's the thing. With vaccines, especially given the way that China blundered their SARS vaccines, 12 months is roughly the amount of time you should expect. I'm all for Trump trying to give people hope. I'm not expecting a vaccine within 12 months to be viable. If it is viable, I will be very interested in what the companies file to the FTC or FDA, and I'd be very interested to see what their research suggests as far as enhancement effects, which is the main reason why the China vaccine was cut off for SARS. They'd already given it out to like 100,000 people, and then they were killing thousands of people by enhancement effects. And so they said, okay, since SARS is gone, we can just go ahead and not do the vaccine anymore. And then, of course, years later, we have this shit come back to bite us. So it's not like this hasn't been looked at for over a couple decades now. But when this thing started, I think we had like 25 years of research into coronavirus vaccines already kind of under the belt. Yep. So this isn't exactly an unresearched area. It's just that there hasn't been existential imperative to drive forward the actual research to get a vaccine production ready. So this is great news that they're doing these kinds of large-scale trials. And it's also great news that the Americans are doing it because we actually give a shit about enhancement effects.
Well, let me pause you for just a quick second and put down what the numbers are that are reported here. It's phase 2 and 3 trials. They've enrolled 42,113 participants, and 35,771 participants are on their second vaccination round. So,
all right, but what's the frequencies? a good question there. What's the
As
the
you
dose?
say, it's OAN in it, so we don't really have that.
Okay. Well, and whatever.
I
Well,
mean,
here,
that's about the scale that you'd need to detect it, detect that it's effective.
so two dose, a 2 dose. So we'll assume that they have like a 3 or 4 dose schedule that they're going on. 2 doses in is great, especially if they haven't done a health check pause. So when they did those pauses,
they did do it.
Not with
okay.
Pfizer, actually.
That's
That was
fine.
with
the fact that it's continued is great news. Then
Yeah, well, they turned around and they what was it? It was like 2 people died after taking the vaccine.
Oh, right,
and
okay.
and then they did actually, so they did do a pause, but it turned around that it wasn't. They found that it wasn't related in any way, shape, or something like that.
Yeah, it's like they had some sort of underlying other issue that would,
right.
would have otherwise been complicated by the COVID either way.
It's terrible that they died, but it's great news that it wasn't because of the vaccine.
Yeah, small victories.
Yeah, I mean, I feel terrible for the families because they had hope that this was going to help them, and then.
Well, I mean, I don't think they died of COVID or anything like that.
Well, no,
if I remember correctly, those 2 cases were like on the way out, anyways. And why were they included in the study to begin with?
Well, why are they included in the study to begin with is to get a representative sample of your population to work against.
Mm.
And unfortunately, sometimes that involves people who are not going to do so well.
Well, like with the some of the initial hydroxychloroquine tests, they were done with people that were far beyond.
That's the funny thing, isn't it? The way that the testing works is if you don't get into that stuff early enough, then you don't really help, which is sad.
You know what? Where did hydroxychloroquine end up?
Oh,
so I know that they had a whole bunch of negative stuff, and then like that got retracted, and it was a giant shit show the whole way down. It's not being
used in hospitals right now, and the main reason is because once you get to the stage where you need hospitalization, it basically is not going to help.
Yeah, it's something that's useful at a small window, but we've got other therapeutics that are basically better at this point.
And it's only useful. It's only useful if you do it in combination with other drugs, and it's not entirely apparent why, and without any kind of pharmacokinetics or in vitro studies to drive home an answer on that, it's not really a good thing to just kind of wing it. Yeah, so you don't have azithromycin and zinc supplementation, and then there's another thing to add in there. Like if you without this combination of meds, the outcome is not as
yeah, basically what you want to do is just look up the supplementation that you do with this and just kind of build your diet around that, because you're putting the things in there that you need for your body to fight this.
Yeah, so zinc and magnesium are very big for your immune system. So just having
you're getting enough sun. If you're not getting enough sun, take a vitamin D supplement. That is showing a huge correlation in good outcomes.
Basically, get yourself some breakfast cereal that's fortified and spend some time outside.
Well, so when I saw the vitamin D stuff, I'm actually very suspicious of the vitamin D things, because at the end of the day, vitamin D, right? Vitamin D is always going to be more plentiful in people who are more active, right? Always, off the top of the bat.
Here's the thing: it's been a thing for decades, on and off, disputed, undisputed, for as far as sickness. The same thing with megadosing vitamin C. So, like, you can go around, like, so just pounding orange juice out in the sun, walking around, it's probably going to be good for you anyway.
Actually, don't do that. Don't pound orange juice. That's drinking sugar water.
No, don't
eat a
don't
shitload of oranges.
Don't block your kidneys. Well, here's the thing. Eating oranges is going to... So, all right, if you get orange juice that is not filled with sugar from a shitty company, if you get yourself... I'm going to go ahead and tout this one because I fucking get to. If you get yourself some Florida orange juice that's just squeezed oranges, and not filled with extra sugar, then it's just oranges. It's just like if you're eating oranges anyway.
Well, it is, but I mean, you are also basically just drinking a concentrated sugar thing, so it is better to honestly burn the calories of peeling the orange. And
that's so negligible, and you fucking know it. Like... Don't give me that shit.
I will give you that shit, sir. I absolutely will.
Go for a fucking walk instead. That is infinitely better for you.
Go for a walk.
A 30-minute walk burns hardly any calories.
Calories from peeling oranges. Give me a break.
And
I think
chewing.
I think if you're walking 30 minutes uphill, it's like 300, and so you want to compare that to peeling an orange. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
good point. Okay, you should take the orange with you while you walk up the hill. Okay.
All right, I can agree. Fine. It'll keep you outside. You'll enjoy a fucking orange. You'll walk around.
Perhaps
do that.
carry a couple and juggle. You'll get your.
Oh my god.
No, we're adding more stipulations here. What's next? They're going to have to put on mind makeup.
Well, no, I was thinking maybe put on an audiobook. Or better still, subscribe to the podcast on Anchor. But with that being said, I think that's probably the most perfect outro I could actually come up with ever. So it's been great, everybody. We'll see you all again really soon.